And with that, let me say good afternoon to everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome back to the Hot Mic Podcast. The Hot Mic Podcast is where divergent points of view debate and discuss hot topics. I'm Nathan Ivy, your humble host, aka Nate the Barbarian. We're living in savage times. And welcome back, everybody. Let me bring everybody into the show here. Hey, there we go. Hey, and we got a phenomenal crew as always. Very smart, intelligent, and hopefully very opinionated people. Today we got Bill Heimlich. We got Tarris Horton's back with us for the second
I got a
time.
quick question. I got a quick question.
Sure.
How can you be both humble and be a barbarian? Explain that.
You know what? That's what makes it talent. That's why it's
Oh,
just me,
I
right?
see.
Because
Okay,
nobody else can do it.
I
Exactly.
got it.
Thank you.
Okay, all right.
But as I was saying, I want to introduce Fanon Rucker, and of course, my partner in this endeavor, Kevin Aldridge. Good morning. Let me take that back. Good afternoon, gentlemen, and welcome back to Hot Mic. Here we go again. Here we go again. And as always, we've got a lot of hopefully what you will think are hot topics. These topics are based on things that have been trending over the last week. A lot of national stuff, some local stuff we may get to. You're always welcome to chime in terms of the comments as well. And we want to say thank you to all the folks that hold us up. Pat Rogers is here with us in the chat. Hey, good to see you, Pat. Good afternoon. Along with Deborah. Hey, good to see you, Deborah. Good afternoon as well. And welcome back. We really appreciate you. Now, we were scheduled to have Raven Monday with us, but I just got the word. And again, prayers up for her, sending her a lot of positive energy. Something's going on. That's as much as I know, but I hope that everything is well with her. And we got your seat is safe for you, Raven. Hopefully, we'll catch up with you real soon, perhaps on Friday. Well, gentlemen, it's been a heck of a week. It's been a heck of a week. Let's get straight into it. I want to start off today's show by showing you a clip. Now, on last show, we talked about Caitlin Clark and the fact that she was named to be Time Magazine's Athlete of the Year. Since then, there's been some movement in that story, including the comments of one of the WNBA owners herself. She weighed in on it, and I want to play this video and then get everybody's opinion about it. So let me put this up on the screen, and hopefully we'll have no problem.
Taken the WNBA almost 28 years to get to the point where we are now. And this year, something clicked with the WNBA, and it's because of the draft of the players that came in. It's just not Caitlin Clark. It's Reese. We have so much talent out there that has been unrecognized. And I don't think we can just pin it on one player.
There has been, this phrase has been couched, hasn't it? The Caitlin Clark effect. Why do you think that has been the case?
Well, I want to be very diplomatic about this. It's just the structure of the way media plays out race. I'm going to be very honest. I feel really bad because I've seen so many players of color that are equally as talented, and they never got the recognition that they should have. And I think right now, it is time for that to happen. So last night, we read Time Magazine, where Caitlin Clark was named Athlete of the Year. Why couldn't they have put the whole WNBA on that cover and said, the WNBA is the league of the year because of all the talent that we have? Because when you just keep singling out one player, it creates hard feelings. And so now you're starting to hear stories of racism.
So that's Sheila Johnson. Quick, interesting backstory. Of course, she made her money off the sale of BET, Black Entertainment Television, and she is one of the few, if maybe one other Black female billionaire in the United States. But she's also the owner of the Mystics. And we brought this conversation up last week, and Phil and I was going back on it a little bit. But you know what? I agree with her. I think she's absolutely right. I think it would have been a better move, a more equitable move, a fair move, if Time Magazine had said, listen, it's the WNBA as a league. How do you just single out just one player? But what's your take?
How do you single out one player? That's the whole point of naming the Athlete of the Year. That's the exact point of naming the Person of the Year. And I know every once in a while they'll name a group or they'll name a group of individuals. But why? I'm sorry. I mean, I'm not a huge sports fan as it is anyway. But I'm listening to this and I hear it now. Where was the owner of the team that Caitlin Clark plays for? I bet you she didn't say that. Why? Because her team gets them good attention. I disagree. I understand where she's coming from, and I appreciate her comments about what many of us talk about, and that is, would Caitlin Clark be getting this love if she was black? And we can say through history, because there has not been a lot of other black players who come into the league and all of a sudden they get all that attention, that probably not. But to say that she shouldn't have gotten it and the whole team should or the whole league should, I disagree.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Fanon. What she said, and she said it herself. She couched it in her comments. She was trying to be diplomatic, and that's what it was. But in her diplomacy, she was being absurd. Caitlin Clark, I'll give it to you that you can't just point to one thing, but it's undeniable that the popularity that came along with this season with the WNBA was largely fueled by Caitlin Clark. Now, that's not to say that Angel Reese and some of the other players that came in didn't add to that. Look, there's the element of the dynamic of Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese going back to college, the national championship game and all of that. It was definitely a part of the dynamic. I kind of talked about that kind of being like the Larry Bird, Magic Johnson kind of syndrome. There's a little bit of that going on with Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark, I think. And race definitely does play a factor. But I will say this, you cannot deny Caitlin Clark's talent. You cannot deny the fact that she was the Rookie of the Year deservedly in the WNBA. And the attention that she brought with her, that it brought to that league, that it wouldn't have had otherwise. I don't care what this lady says or anybody else. It's a proven fact. You would not have had the eyes and the popularity on the WNBA without Caitlin Clark this season. Get mad if you want to, but that's the truth. And so what she said is patently absurd. Nobody would have said at any point in time, hey, Michael Jordan, why not the whole NBA? When Michael Jordan is the athlete of the year, get out of here with that nonsense, man. We got to stop that.
Yeah. This is much ado about nothing. Look, I don't follow, sorry, call me a chauvinist. I don't follow women's college. I don't basketball. I don't follow women's pro basketball. Sorry. But I know the name Caitlin Clark, not so much from the pro thing, but because I just heard enough through the grapevine when she was in college that she was so dominant. And the fact that she's the only person in that league that I really know indicates a reflection of her impact. It was just like we dealt with Trump on the Time Person of the Year, whenever we talked about that last week. It's not saying that he's the greatest politician or certainly not the greatest leader, but he did have the greatest impact. And I think that's what this award reflects.
Whenever I think about the Johnson lady, I think about BET, Robert Johnson. And when they sold to Viacom, they weren't thinking about black people then when they sold to Viacom and they started that infiltration of black thought with the booty dance and all that kind of stuff. But and this is a passion project for her. She's a billionaire. So of course she's going to push race when she can for ticket sales, in my opinion, because if she's really concerned about race, she would have been concerned about race whenever she sold BET to become a billionaire to Viacom, and Viacom started funneling all that trash to black individuals. She would have been thinking about race then, but she wasn't. But now that it's, this race hustling thing is, if you haven't seen it's about to come to an end, I mean, this is more writing on the wall. And the fact that you guys are saying it's ridiculous is just music to my ears.
Yeah, this is one of those rare times when I am now convinced that I'm right. And the number one reason why.
What do you mean? You always think you're right. What do you mean rare time? Where do you get
you're
that?
Right. You caught me. You're right. So this is yet another time when I think that I'm right. And I'm convinced now because all of you are on the other side of this. This is clear. Caitlin Clark would not have been named Time Magazine's Athlete of the Year this year if she were black. It would not have happened. How do we know this? Because if you really want to take the best athlete statistically from the WNBA, it's not Caitlin Clark. It's other players like Asia Wilson. I think that Miss Johnson was 100% spot on. It would have been more fair, and it would have made more sense if they said, "Hey, the WNBA is the league of the year." It is very, very clear that the only reason why she got this award is because she's white. That's her best attribute right now. She didn't win this award because she's the best athlete in the WNBA, because she is not. She won this award because she's pretty good and she's white.
Yeah,
I
people.
disagree.
I know she had an impact, so that people who never care or follow women's basketball, guys like me, know her name. Okay?
Really?
Yes.
What did she do to have an impact? Tell me what Caitlin Clark did.
She's a good athlete,
athletically
Nathan.
to
She's
have
a
an
good
impact.
athlete. I mean, you can't deny Caitlin Clark's talent. She is the rookie of the year.
What did she do?
She statistically is the best college athlete of all time. So you can't sit up here and say like Caitlin Clark doesn't have a resume. And just like we talked about the man of the year or person of the year last year for the Time cover, this is not just simply who is the best athlete. It's the most impactful, the one who had the most impact.
What did she do to be impactful?
Rising ticket sales.
Well, what did she do?
Attention. Her personality, her talent. People are watching because they want to see her play, Nathan. You cannot watch that, but it's pretty good.
And she's a white girl.
Oh,
that's
come on.
Here's what I'm going to say. Here's what I'm going to say, Nathan. And I said this when we've had this conversation before. Okay, let's be real. Race plays a dynamic in most things that we take a look at. And I will say this, that in a sport that is dominated predominantly by African Americans, when there is a white player who is talented, whether that's a Larry Bird, whether that's a Luka Doncic, even though you could say he's European, in a sport where that's not the case, that is going to draw more attention, just like Tiger Woods in golf. Tiger Woods, the fact that he was not just that he was arguably the greatest golfer of all time, in my book, the greatest golfer of all time, but that was enhanced by the fact that he was an African American doing it in a white dominated sport. So yes, race does play a factor, but you still got to have game. You can't just be white in a predominantly black sport and be middle of the road. No, Caitlin Clark is getting her flowers because she's good. She's serving up a lot of those same women.
She's pretty good and she's white. And comparing
no, she's not pretty good, Nathan.
She's pretty good and she's white.
I tell you what you're missing, Nathan. Didn't she graduate?
And then there's like 2 or 3 other sisters that are way better than her in all categories in the WNBA.
You're missing the point.
And comparing her to Tiger Woods,
Nathan, they said
talent who dominated the sport for years and years and years. He dominated. Comparing him to her is a travesty.
Actually, it's not, Nathan, because most people said that Caitlin Clark was not going to be able to duplicate what she did in college, that she was going to have hard knocks when she came into the WNBA. Not only did she blow those critics, prove them all wrong, she won Rookie of the Year, set all kinds of rookie records during her first year. And this is her first year. Took a team that was last in the league to the playoffs.
She didn't do it by herself.
Bro. You're a hater.
You're
a hater, Nathan. And it's obvious.
See, that's the point that Miss Johnson was getting to. It goes back to this white girl thing, as if she elevated the WNBA all by herself. And just going back to Tiger Woods dominated golf for a decade. You cannot compare that to the Rookie of the Year in 1 year.
Here's what you're missing, Nathan. I'll tell you what you're missing. Wasn't she still playing college last year? And isn't that correct? I mean, not last year, early this year. Wasn't she still in college?
Who?
Caitlin Clark.
Wasn't she playing college? I don't know if she was taking college. I don't know if she was taking college courses or not. If that's what you're asking.
No. What I'm asking, didn't she?
NCAA playoffs. The NCAA championship was it March of 2020?
Exactly. Right. The point is, Nathan.
Did she win a championship?
Nathan,
did she get beat?
You're missing the point. You're missing the point. You keep acting like it's the best WNBA player. No, it's player of the year. In this calendar year, she dominated dominated women's college basketball.
No, she didn't
It's not
dominate because
just
she didn't win a championship.
Oh, please! You can't dominate. Larry Bird never won a
No.
championship. Don't
No,
you think he dominated?
The South Carolina Gamecocks, Dawn Staley's team, they dominated.
Excuse
Caitlin
me.
Clark didn't dominate anything.
Didn't Larry Bird dominate college basketball?
Larry, I don't know what the point is.
Well,
Let me say
Larry
again,
Bird didn't
he
win.
didn't
He lost
dominate,
in the
but he was a
final to
good
Magic
player.
Johnson. He dominated, though. He dominated. You just because you don't win the NCAA tournament doesn't mean you don't dominate. A player doesn't dominate.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to be naming somebody player of the year, they should have some hardware behind them, in my humble opinion. That's just my thought.
Well, let's go back and look at all of the athletes of the year and see if they meet that criteria, Nathan. I bet you they don't.
Maybe. So, Tarris, did you want to jump in? I thought you were going to say something.
I think you guys are having a great conversation. I don't think it's because she's bringing something to the sport long term that the WNBA is trying to, I think, in marketing. If you're going to blame anybody, blame whoever is black who doesn't have the marketing team that Caitlin Clark has behind her that gets her the publicist, and because that's where it's all behind the scenes deals. What's selling papers and what's going to be good for the sports in longevity. And Caitlin Clark is good for basketball too, because the middle school girls and the middle school and high school girls, they know who Caitlin Clark. She's a household name. To the other girls who you named, maybe besides Angel Reese, they don't know. So as far as how for the far good of the sport, I think it's a good move.
You think what's a good move?
To put her on there as player of the year.
Okay. And just overlook all these. See, on one hand, you know, and the more I think about it, let me take it a step further. Because, see, last show I gave her flowers. I'm going to take them flowers back from Caitlin.
Oh, I'm sure she'll be very disappointed, Nathan.
Oh, yeah, she's going to be.
Somebody has to break the word to her, okay?
She's not going to be able to make a move until, you know, we make amends, I know. But let me take those flowers back. Because on the last show, I was a whole lot more generous. I got a chance to really think about it. What should have happened is instead of her saying, look, you know, there's a lot of black women that came before me and they need to be looked at. What she should have said is like, look, I can't accept this award. This has to be a WNBA league-wide award. That would have matched her rhetoric, the words that came out of her mouth in that interview with Time Magazine, to her actions. That's what she should have done.
We'll see what happens.
$3 million. She was offered $3 million by Ice Cube.
When Nathan
$3 million
gets
by Ice Cube, she could have put $3 million to go play in the Big Three. So, excuse me. She was offered $3 million to go play in the Big Three with Ice Cube. Turned it down to do what's best for the sport of the WNBA. I think she's a great ambassador for the sport of the WNBA and a great ambassador for young girls coming up. I really do. Take race out of it. She foregone $3 million to say, I'm going to do what's best for this sport. That her parents probably spent all this time traveling for. She spent all this time playing AAU ball. She knows what it's like to spend time in them gyms, and just like other families. So if she gets the opportunity to excel the sport or exalt the sport, take it. And I think she's doing a phenomenal job.
Hey, listen, there's a couple things you said I agree with completely. She is a role model for a lot of players coming up, a lot of young women, and maybe even some young boys as well who are watching her. She is a great ambassador for the WNBA. Most certainly. And you're right. They should be using her to promote. But as Pamela writes, Aja Wilson, who plays for the Los Angeles Aces, has better stats and has had better stats for the last couple of years. And she's got at least, 2 chips. But she doesn't get the same type of publicity because she's not white. And
she doesn't get the same type of publicity because people don't want to watch Aja Wilson at the same rate they want to watch Caitlin Clark.
Wilson is black.
And look, let me just say this. Let's just be real about
why is that, Kevin?
Let's just be real about what the WNBA has been. Okay. The WNBA has been a league that has not been able to financially support itself. If not subsidized by the NBA, there would be no WNBA. So let's just be real about the amount of viewership and people who actually want to watch women's professional basketball. Now, that's not popular. That's not going to be a popular take, and people are not going to like that in these politically correct times. But the reality is the reality of what the league has been. What Caitlin Clark is doing is bringing more people, more men, more casual eyes to the game of women's basketball, which is growing the sport. That's a good thing. And you've got to have players, and I'm not dissing Asia Wilson and her talent. She is the best player in the WNBA without question. But Asia Wilson was not bringing to the table what Caitlin Clark is bringing.
Why doesn't she get the publicity that Caitlin Clark gets?
Her publicist, and she's white. She's white. I agree with that, Nathan.
Thank you. I don't know why you can't just admit that.
I have admitted that, Nathan.
I got a question. Nathan, when you are named, which I'm sure you will at some point in the days ahead, when you are named Podcast Host of the Year, are you going to decline that award and say, no, it's my team? It's my team. I decline it. Yes or no?
Why would I?
Well, you're asking her to do that. Why shouldn't you show the same level of honesty?
But I'm not a white female ball player who's being exalted over two generations of black female ball players.
That has nothing to do. Look,
it has everything.
Here's how I'm going to blow your argument out. Simply on the basis that Caitlin Clark is white. I'm not saying that that's not a factor, but here's what I'm saying: is there plenty other white women players in the WNBA who have been good? You've had Sue Bird. You've had a number of other white female players who have played in the WNBA who have been good, but none of them have been able to bring to the table what Caitlin Clark has. It's the game. I'm not saying that white doesn't have anything to do with it, but you got to have game, brother, that is exceptional, that is going to bring people's attention and make them want to watch. As good as some of those other women are, they missing something, the white women included, that Caitlin Clark has that's drawing attention to the WNBA now. You can hate it, you can not like it, but brother, those are the facts.
Well, here's what I would say to that. Well, I would say that there's a lot of white female players who were in the exact same position as Caitlin Clark, and people criticize them. And they've said the same thing as Caitlin Clark. Like, look, I'm a white girl. I did my thing. I hold it down. But let me give a lot of respect to these black women who have been here. I think that's my point. The point is, I think America fell in love with the white girl who's pretty good and shoots threes in college because she was going up against the black girl, Angel Reese. And they fell in love with that story in college and followed her to the WNBA. And that's why it makes more sense what the owner said, Miss Johnson, owner of the Mystics. It's not just Caitlin Clark. It's Angel Reese. It's that tension, that drama. It's everything. And that was the whole point in what she was saying. It's not just Caitlin Clark. It's the WNBA. It's Angel Reese. It's Asia Wilson. It's all of it. And Caitlin Clark was sort of like the icing on the cake, so to speak, but she ain't the whole cake. So they should have respected everybody in the WNBA and recognized the entire league. It's a league thing. To point out just the white girl that's cool in basketball and can shoot threes, it's white supremacy. Is that cultural white supremacy?
Oh, jeez. Oh, my gosh.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to keep it real.
Talk about stretching it. Talk about stretching it, buddy. That's.
Oh, ain't no stretches.
Now it's white supremacy.
I agree with you, Nate.
It's always been white supremacy.
I agree with you, Nate.
I just didn't use the words.
I agree with you. I agree.
But anybody who says Caitlin Clark is an average basketball player, I don't know what they're
pretty good. She's
better than pretty good. I think people who say that just have a chip on their shoulder about her and just don't like Caitlin Clark, because I think if you know the game of basketball, if you watch her play, and again, listen to the players who play against her talk about how she plays. I don't hear any of the females in the league saying that about her.
Well,
and nobody in the NBA said that outside of Isaiah Thomas.
Well, Asia Wilson
about Larry Bird.
Asia Wilson said that.
If you listen to all the NBA players who played against Larry Bird talk about Larry Bird, none of them will say he was just an okay.
Isaiah Thomas said that. He said
Isaiah Thomas, also the same guy who lined up the the NBA All-Stars to not pass Michael Jordan the ball. Zeke is a hater too.
Isaiah's
a hater too.
Kevin, Asia Wilson at the beginning of the year, Asia Wilson with 2 chips, the best player in the WNBA, she said the same thing about Caitlin Clark within the first month of the season.
She said she didn't have no game.
No, she said she's getting a whole lot more press because she's white. That's what she said.
But she didn't say she didn't have no game, though. That's
Well,
what
that's
I'm
not even the issue.
I
The
want to
issue
see them
is-
play a game of 21
That's
a
not
horse.
even the issue.
I want
I
to see
said
the
she
21
is the
game
issue.
of horse. Televised on Netflix. You know, I think we can promote that for the summertime. Asia and Caitlin in a game of horse.
That'd be cool.
I think we need to push that real big. We can settle this thing once and for all.
Oh man, listen, Asia Wilson would destroy her. She's too strong and physical. Destroy that young white girl. Now she's pretty good. She's pretty good. She can get on the road, but she can't mess with Asia Wilson. But that good conversation. We can agree, disagree. I'm on an island all by myself on this one.
Yeah.
But, you know,
And I might say,
let me say
deservedly so. Deservedly so.
Sure. I do deserve it. You're right.
Can I interject for a second though for Nathan's defense? I agree with you when you said it was for white supremacy. I believe it's for white supremacy because it's Time Magazine who promoted this. Is a magazine. They're a left-leaning machine.
Here we go.
Machine that has WNBA, and they use the NBA and the WNBA to push their messaging out. So of course they're going to use, just like they did after 1968 when the civil rights movement came through and the white women came through and hijacked the civil rights movement and they hoist up white women all the time. That's what they're doing with Caitlin Clark. It is white supremacy. You're absolutely correct.
So the left-leaning magazine hoisted the second most conservative president in our time as the man of the year. At the same time, they're promoting, I guess what you would say is sympathetic white rage or something like that by promoting Caitlin Clark. I'm confused.
No, I'm just saying it's. I believe that he's using he's said white supremacy. I believe that the magazine that he used they use white supremacy to promote propaganda in news media outlets such as ABC, and that's why they gave it to Trump, because everybody's going to come around and kiss the ring. All of them are. You're seeing it come. You're seeing it come around. They're coming around and kiss the ring. That's why.
We definitely gonna talk about the ring kissing. It's very medieval, but let's got a couple topics before we get there. So listen, I'm gonna show a photograph for you. To you, and they say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So when I show you this picture, tell me what comes to mind. Now, of course, on the left, you got the vice president-elect J.D. Vance, senator, and also of the great state of Ohio. On the other side, on the right, of course, you've got Donald Trump, President-elect Donald Trump. And in the middle, that's Daniel Perry. Daniel Perry, everybody. He is fresh from being acquitted from an incident that happened on a New York subway in which he used a chokehold on an unarmed black man by the name of Jordan Neely and basically choked him out. He was to death. And he was acquitted this week. And then shortly after his acquittal, J.D. Vance and Donald Trump invited him to be the guest, and that's the photograph you see, at the Army versus Navy game, where, as I've been reading, he was received with thunderous applause. I think that this picture represents a clear and present danger, primarily, in my opinion, to people of color. But I want to know what you think about it. What do you think? Anybody want to jump in there first?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, they've had a number of these incidents. They seem to always happen on New York subways where there's an alleged attack and somebody steps in and I would say defends people and then gets prosecuted and the public kind of joins him. I can't say for sure about the facts of this thing because it's a little unclear. We do know that he was acquitted. But I will tell you, so I tend to side usually with the guy who is protecting people. However, on the other hand, I don't like the fact that Vance and Trump invited him because they did that to send a message. And it's kind of it really is, I would agree, it's a racist message. They're putting the focus on this guy, even assuming I would say he may be innocent, didn't do anything wrong, but they're trying to send a message that if, black criminals come after you, we're going to get them. And I think it's a terrible message, and I think they're sending I know what they're doing, by focusing on him, but I don't believe it's right.
When I see that, Nathan, what comes to my mind is it's on brand. It is what Donald Trump stands for. You know, it's no different than if you remember what was the young man, the 18-year-old who shot Rittenhouse, I think was his name, that he has been uplifted and lauded in MAGA circles. And Phil is exactly right that this plays into that narrative that Donald Trump has had about how to deal with crime, you know, bang their heads when you put them in the police cruiser, punch them in the face at the rally. You know,
it's a dog whistle. It's a dog whistle.
Yeah, it's more of this violence is acceptable if you deem somebody to be, you know, a criminal threat, especially if they're brown skinned. Do what you got to do. We've got your back. The court system's going to be on your side. And what also plays into this guy wasn't a police officer, but he's the next closest thing, which is a military veteran, which also plays into another notion or another narrative that they like to play in of this, you know, support of the military, even though he's referred to them as suckers and losers for those who, you know, go into combat. But they play on this narrative of, you know, support for law enforcement, support for the military, even though you support January 6 rioters who beat up police officers. I mean, so there's all sorts of hypocrisy between the brand that Trump tries to display and what he tries to play on in terms to curry favor with folks. And it works. It works with the group that he's trying to reach. So it's on brand. That's what I say.
Yeah.
You want to go, Fanon? What I think is a Marine, and Trump. Get him out of here. I see a Marine. And then if I was on my way to New York City from New Jersey, and I was in the subway and I got off at the wrong turn and I ended up in the bottom floor of the Grand Central Station. And I'm telling you, I've seen that was the worst living I've ever seen. People who can't assimilate back into society were down there. And from this case, first of all, the man was not deceased whenever the police arrived. He was still breathing when the police arrived. This guy was. Second of all, he had him in a restraining hold, and two other people, I believe one was a black person, one was a white person, were holding this man's arms down as well. And the man was saying, if you let me up, I'm going to eat you. If you let me up, I'm going to. If you let me up, I'm going to. So this judge or prosecuting attorney, let's go to the prosecutor. Fanon, and please help me if I'm wrong. The prosecuting attorney, there's an election year, so he overcharged this guy with something that wouldn't stick. And now he has his name out here in a political grandstand. Y'all try to put it on Trump. Let's go back to the charging DA who charged this guy something that wouldn't stick. So why wouldn't Vance 2028, y'all keep talking about Trump, why wouldn't Vance 2028 use this Marine? I'll go with that.
So when you talk about the idea of overcharging, if I recall, they actually charged him with alternative offenses, so that if the jury felt like one was too serious, that they could find him guilty of something else. And in fact, if I recall, the jury first had a question asking whether or not they could find him guilty of the lesser before they tried to decide the greater. So I don't know, and I didn't follow this closely to know how many charges and what exactly he was charged with and all the particulars with the facts. But I can tell you that I don't believe that prosecutor was running this year. So if you mean that they charged him, you mean in a year where politics was on stage when you say it was a political move? Because what I have seen, even particularly around here, that when prosecutors are running for office, they do that so that they get the publicity, and then right after the election is over, they throw the case or the case goes away, and then, you know, they've gotten the attention from it. So if you're suggesting that because it was a political year, there was some, you know, possibly motive or intention for him to charge big, I don't know who that would have helped under that circumstance if, in fact, he wasn't running. But when I see that picture, I see an ironic hypocrisy, because the same week as Trump and Vance invited this guy to watch the Army-Navy game, Trump feigned outrage and anger at the idea that people were supportive of this guy who shot and killed a CEO in an assassination. Now, obviously, there are a whole lot of differences: premeditated, intentional, hunting this guy down versus, grabbing this guy on the train and saying he felt threatened. He was trying to protect other people. But the idea is taking another's life and the reason that people do it. And then how you respond to that person overall. Here, we know this person took a life. Now, his argument was, I was just protecting everybody, doing what I was trained to do. But he took somebody's life who really, we know, had mental health issues in a very charged environment where every year, every month, almost every week, well, I ain't say every week, but every month, there is a racially charged incident where someone is seriously hurt or killed. And we constantly talk about it. And to prop that person up, knowing that was the environment that we were living in, it's hypocrisy. And it like I think Phil said, it's a dog whistle. I really do believe that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Can I interject for a second? Because he was alive when the police came. Penny was alive when the police showed up. So it was, so you guys are, I'm not saying misinformation, but that's an important part. And another part that nobody thinks, toxicology report. He had what's K in his blood system? What's the same stuff that they had in that when you have that in your blood system and you're on that type of drug, I don't know what kind of call it, and your adrenaline's up because it's, and I don't know what it's called with the thing, but your adrenaline's up, and it makes your brain do certain things when you're on drugs, and they're on drugs. So when he say you're on drugs, I'm saying in a scenario, he's on drugs, he gets onto a subway, and with subways are dangerous, and he starts going off. Penny grabs him and restrains him along with two other people. And then the police come, and then after the police get him, that's what, after police and they take him off, that's what, after he passes away, he did not choke him out. That's not the truth. But after they get him, he passes away. Then after that, toxicology, all that needs to go into play. And I believe that's why the jury came out with an acquittal, because it has to be subsequent evidence that it's one reasonable doubt, and that wasn't what it was. And I think they charged him with manslaughter or something like that. That wasn't the case. It wasn't. He was overcharged, and like I said, toxicology reports. When you start getting into what kind of drugs and what kind of prescription medicine he was on, if it was fentanyl, you start getting all that kind of stuff, and you start doing toxicology whenever you're under distress. It's a different type of passage to the blood, and that's when we'll find out. No,
and no, because the facts are inconsistent. Well, the facts and what you said just don't match up. So, and somebody Google it just to double check. Don't take my word from it.
Fact check it.
But the coroner came out and said that the reason why Neely died was directly because of the chokehold. So whether he died in the hospital or on the ambulance, he died because of the chokehold that was applied to him, the pressure. And
but what Tarris is saying about the drugs is, I think what Tarris is saying is it justifies or it provides evidence of his aggressive behavior and the threats he was making. It isn't that he died of drugs.
You got people on drugs.
Here's what I would say to that, though. Here's what I would say to that, though, Phil, is, again, the facts and the evidence. Yes, he may have been talking, but he had not attacked, assaulted, touched anyone. And then wait a minute, let me finish. And then there's this question of how do you restrain somebody and what is reasonable restraint? A chokehold is something that has been outlawed by many police departments across this country because of the devastating effects of the chokehold. This is a military veteran who has the training and the skill to incapacitate and kill somebody. What is a reasonable use of force in that situation? Why would a private, especially a private citizen, someone who is not even deputized or legally in that, under what obligation do they have if we even say that a chokehold is illegal for police to institute? So there's the question of, could this guy have been restrained by less fatalistic means than what this guy chose to employ there? Him being a military veteran, I'm sure, and with the assistance of two other people, as Tarris has pointed out, the guy could have been restrained reasonably without a chokehold. And that is what I think really needs to be discussed there, is that type of restraint, which we know has fatal consequences.
That's a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking.
Well, hey, look,
that's the position that we're in right now.
That's what it is, though.
That's all we can do.
He can sit there and come up with a list of, let me see, what would be the least aggressive or safest thing I can do? When you're in the heat of that situation, I think people have to be judged a little differently than we're judging.
Yeah, but
could have left the man alone.
Yeah. I mean, let's be honest. What we're talking about is somebody who is engaging in threatening conduct. Conduct. You cannot. What they say, you can't bring a gun to a knife fight. In the same way, if you are not physically threatened, as you know, you cannot use deadly force or lethal force or even greater force to repel what is not actually force being used. There was no force being used. He was acting a fool on the train. Again, and it's not on Perry to know, but he had mental health issues. So does this then justify that anytime we see somebody on the street who's talking to themselves very loud, talking, threats to the birds and to the sky and to me because I happen to walk past, that I can pull out my 9 and take him out justifiably because he is talking to himself out loud and I felt threatened? That's subjective. And we know that when we're talking about self-defense, part of that is a subjective determination. There's an objective and a subjective. The objective is, the subjective is, do I personally believe threatened? The objective is, what steps do I take to repel what I believe? If the threat is unreasonable, if it's an unreasonable threat, meaning I have no reason to actually be afraid of this person, then my subjective fear won't pass muster when I'm standing before a jury. Here, he didn't hit nobody. He didn't grab nobody. He didn't pull out a knife or raise the blade. He didn't have somebody else around a chokehold, and he's dead.
But the jury said that he was innocent. The people who were around him said that they agreed with what he did. Everybody who was brought into that
don't make it right.
But the people, okay. So if all of us are all 5 of us are right here or somewhere, and I'm got somebody in a chokehold, and you agree, all of us agree, and we go to the courthouse and we testify that we agree that I had him in the right position, but the other people on the outside don't agree with the 5 of us that were there.
Hey,
come on, man. Come on.
It don't matter.
In that situation, Tarris, it ain't even getting that far. If I'm there, I ain't even gonna let you get that far. Because if I see you putting a chokehold on another person like that, and I'm looking at it, and you going too far, I'm gonna try to physically unpry the person and let you know that you're wrong and you're about to kill somebody. Yeah. I'm not even gonna let it go that far. Whether I like the individual or whether I felt threatened by them or whether I was irritated by them, because that's what it is. It's homeless people are an irritation. We've talked about the New York Times, the New York subway, mentally ill people, they harass people, people feel a certain way. And so just because you feel a certain way about somebody doesn't mean that they should be killed. But Kevin, you said something earlier. I
don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. That's very leading. I don't agree that the guy should have lost his life. I'll stand.
That's what we're talking about. He just lost his life. He just lost his life. Daniel Perry is a coward. When I see this, I see a coward. He's a coward. This man testified that he was afraid to let him go because I was on my back. And if I would have let him go, then he would have been on top of me. If you are that afraid, then don't engage. Leave the man alone. If you choke this man out because once you got him in that position, you was too much of a chicken to let him go because you might actually have to fight. You might actually have to square up with another grown man.
Have you ever heard of George Zimmerman? You create the situation that causes you to
create a situation and then you want to cry about it. So when I see this, when I see this photograph, this is a threat. This is a threat.
To who?
Kevin said something earlier. He said, it's like you're giving license to commit violence, that violence is acceptable. And I agree with you, Kevin. It's like they're saying violence is acceptable to people that we find undesirable. If you're undesirable to us, then we can take you out the game. This picture to me reminds me of some of those black and white photographs that I've seen of public lynchings. You see good white folks standing around smiling with the sheriff and city leaders. That's what this looks like to me.
I'm not scared. I'm not scared of that picture or anybody white. I'll just say that don't put no fear in me at all. I'm not scared. I'm not threatened by anybody, especially those three people. I'm not scared of those three people, and I'm a black man in America. They don't scare me.
I
That's
hope
why
you
you're
don't wind up.
Republican.
I sincerely hope you don't wind up in a chokehold on a subway somewhere. Because, brother, let me tell you right now, if the perpetrator looks like that, they're gonna get off scot-free.
Yep.
And I feel for you. And this is what I would say. Look, let's just say this. We were talking about race in the Caitlin Clark situation. And you can disagree with me, and I'm open to be saying that I'm wrong on this, but this is what I believe. That if the situations had been reversed, if a black man had choked out a mentally disturbed white man on the subway, his verdict would have been different than what this guy's verdict. And you can't convince me. You can't convince me that it wouldn't have been. Even if people would have been saying it was justified, he would have faced some type of punishment. I can almost guarantee you that.
Absolutely. We see that same phenomenon happening with black officers all the time. We see white officers getting away with what we think are just heinous crimes. And then we see black officers being discharged for administrative reasons, or they lied to internal affairs or something other that's not as big as other offenses. Happens all the time. I agree with you 1,000%. Phil, you're saying
Are you saying white officers get treated more harshly than, black officers get treated more harshly than white officers?
Absolutely, I'm saying that.
All right, well, let me tell you about my experience, okay? When I was on city council, there was a police lieutenant, I believe his name was Clarence Williams. We're going back a ways. And frankly, this guy was involved in all kinds of stuff, domestic violence stuff, all kinds of stuff. But I remember whenever he was accused or charges filed against him within the police department, our whole city council, they called public hearing, and they would talk about they would put all this pressure on. And so what happened, the city manager got pressure, would dismiss the charges. So with all due respect, and by the way, you'll recall, I think a week ago, there was a story about, I think the highest ranking African-American female in the police department was just discharged. As far as I could tell, she deserved it. So my experience, with all due respect, is anything but that black officers get treated worse than white officers. We can go back to the Ron Twitty situation, if you guys remember that. If anything,
yeah, that's a great example.
If anything, Ron Twitty was involved in some affair and he lied about stuff, but they kind of eased up on it. With all due respect, my experience is that white officers, or I should say that black officers, get treated less harshly than white officers.
Have you asked black officers about that?
Have I done a survey? Have I personally?
Have you ever talked to black officers?
I'm talking about what I have seen with my own eyes.
What I would say is go ask black officers what they think.
Yeah, and ask white officers what they think. So what?
So you're going to get a deeper insight as to what the experience of black officers actually is.
I have talked to a lot of officers when I was back in political office. I've talked to a whole bunch of them about it, white and black.
Yeah, you should go talk to some black officers and ask them about their experiences. I think they'll probably agree with me.
I just told you, I know as a prosecutor and as a city council member. So it's not like I'm not informed. I saw these cases. I saw the evidence against them, and I saw how politicians, frankly, trying to get the black vote, would come and defend people like Clarence Williams and others who were deserving of the accusation, deserving the punishment they got.
Yeah, well, look, nobody's denying. Like I remember the Ron Twitty situation. I was a reporter in Cincinnati when all of that went down. And, Ron Twitty, I believe at the time, was one of the highest ranking African-American officers on the police department, long serving.
He was the highest rank. He was.
Yes, he deserved what he had coming. And they allowed him, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they allowed him to resign instead of firing him, which, they could have been well within their rights to do. But I don't think that's anything special that was exclusive to Ron Twitty. Which I think is Nathan's point, like that, those sorts of cutting people slack and giving people, soft landings have been something that white officials have been getting for a long time, Phil. And you basically
come white cop who was
come on, Phil. You can't say
Phil.
that. Look, let's talk
Phil.
about Tom
Phil.
Stryker.
Come on.
Hey, Phil. Let's talk about Tom Stryker. Okay, let's talk about Tom Stryker, who was in that same. Who was in that same era, where Tom Stryker, we know where he famously used the N-word, where he famously used the N-word in a training session, and he got a slap on the wrist for that, right? This is your police chief, right? Who's in charge of your whole department using racial epithets. That's no small thing. Do you disagree
and
with
guess
that?
what? There have been black cops that have been caught saying bad stuff.
We're talking about the chief of police. We're talking about the head of your department.
I don't remember
Phil,
the case. I don't remember what happened.
Let me ask you a quick question.
Nothing happened.
Are you aware, Phil, that there is an organization called the Sentinels?
I am very aware, and most of them very well.
Right. So if black
I was in
officers,
office.
if
Yes.
black officers are not treated unfairly, why did they feel a need to create the Sentinels?
I'll tell you. Well, to say that people can, and that justifies that they have grievances, very good evidence. I'll tell you something about the Sentinels, my experience, okay?
Oh, it's spot on evidence. I'm spot on.
I'm sorry.
Kind of losing you, Phil.
Yeah, it sounds like it's
Yeah,
connected.
your audio is kind of in and out there.
Ask me a question.
Got hot.
Ask me a question.
Yeah, I want to hear your answer, but
sorry.
your audio
I'm
is kind
sorry.
of messing up.
Can you hear me
Your
now,
audio's kind of
guys?
messing up. I'm not sure what it is. Yeah, I think it's better now. Go right ahead.
Still messing up?
Yeah, it's still messing
All
up.
due respect, was they tended. Oh, you can't.
Hey, Phil, how about
Can you
we
hear
try
me?
this, man? Can you unplug and come back into
Rehook
the
this.
room? Because I really want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really want to hear it. Sounds like you. Okay, yeah, and we'll bring you straight back. Hopefully, yeah, something's going on there. I'm hearing all
Corner,
kinds of stuff.
I got hot. It burned up. That one Mike burnt up.
I want
Yeah,
to
the
reserve
mic
my
burnt up,
comments
yeah.
until he comes back.
Yeah, I
As
want
a
to make sure
lawyer who represents
Get
black
your
police
comment
officers, who does police misconduct and brutality cases, who's
Oh,
been
yeah,
a
we all over the
prosecutor and a
place.
judge, and has multiple friends who are black and white police officers. I just want to sit back and listen to another perspective. But I can certainly tell you, and I'll be happy to say that when Phil comes back on, that black officers, many of them specifically, and Phil, I want you to hear this. I represent officers, black
hear me?
and white. I do officers. I
guys hear me
do that
now?
and have before.
We can hear you.
Can you guys hear me now? All right.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead. Finish, Fanon, then I'll respond. Go ahead.
No. Just wanted to offer, and I wanted you to hear this. I represent currently a lot of officers, a lot of black. I've been with friends. I mean, hell, as prosecutors, you're friends with cops, and I can tell you anecdotally that they will absolutely express to you that they do not receive the same accommodation and privileges as their counterparts in the employment context. But it's the same thing that people complain about in the employment context.
I'll give you a response to that. First of all, when I was in office, I don't know who the current leadership, I found the leadership of the Sentinels tended to be the most militant and the ones that were always playing the race card. That was to respond to Nathan's comment about that. But when you say your clients say they're being targeted because of their race, I'll tell you what I believed, and a lot of white officers say, they have that consent decree, which I think is still in effect, basically, which gives blacks and women priority in promotions over white officers. What do you think the white officers feel about that?
They feel well. Here's what I would imagine. I imagine they feel the same way. I imagine they feel the same way that black officers felt before the consent decree. Because here's what you and a whole lot of other
goes
people
back to the 1980s.
Here's what you and a whole lot of other people fail to recognize, Phil, is that things like that are put into place because of white privilege, because of
in the
discrimination,
80s,
because of the good old boy system that has excluded black people.
It was in place.
Look, man, you can say it was 35, 55, however many years ago. It was 400 years of unfair treatment for people who look like me.
It's different now than it was in the 1980s and the 60s. Come on.
Let me finish my thought. Do you
Yeah.
realize how generationally how much that sets back a race of people generationally? Phil, let me hold you back. Let me hold white people back for 10 years. That will set you back generations. Black people in this country were held back for 400 years. You don't think? Look, you would have to make so many allowances and considerations just to bring things current that most white people couldn't deal with it. Let's never forget that black people never got their 40 acres and a mule that they were promised. Let's talk about
we're going
that.
back to Civil War now to justify this.
Hey, look, I'm just
justify
saying,
favoritism
how would that have set
We're
up
going to
black
Civil
people
War.
for? How would that have set up black people for generational wealth? Maybe you don't have the poverty and the situations that you have today. But see, Phil, this is what you and people like you like to do. You like to ignore history. And then when black people bring it up, you're talking about something that was 50 years. Yes, because the effects of 50 years ago still
but see,
exist
you're
today.
misunderstanding.
And
You're misunderstanding
you
my
don't
point
want
about
to
50
acknowledge
years.
that.
You
don't want to
misunderstand my
acknowledge
point.
that.
All right.
Can I jump in on that one, Phil? Can I jump in on that, Phil?
Yeah, go ahead,
I
Tarris,
think
sure.
what Kevin is saying, and I agree with Kevin on this one. It was not you specifically, but white men, 45 to 60-year-olds fault, because after Vietnam and everybody was on this peace love thing, and it got your turn to empower black men who are articulate and smart, not you specifically, but your demographic, white men. You hired your buddies, your nepotism. You hired this F up over here who's on drugs that you want to give your cousin another chance. You left these black men specifically out here who are well educated and well qualified for these jobs. You left us out here hanging. And this is a direct when things like this happen, and you're like, well, what about the white guys? Because I got a lot of white friends, and I'm like, you should have done something about it when you had that opportunity, when you were getting out of college and you were graduating from college, and you had that opportunity to bring along one of your black friends that you met, you were buddies with in college, but you left him back there for get a drug charge or something like that. I blame them for all this stuff. So we can break it all down into all that kind of stuff, but that's where it lies down.
Let me respond. Let me respond, if I may. When we say go back 45 years, what I'm saying is in the 1980s, the consent decree was put in place to remedy the 40, 50, 100 years of discrimination up to that point. Okay, that's agreed. But what has happened is we are now in the 2020, 2024, 45 years after the consent decree. And as far as I know, we are still in a situation where every time there is a promotion in the police department, they are required, after like 3 white guys get promoted, they're required to put a woman or an African American. And understand this, that test is a objective test. It's not subjective. And so if this is the argument we have here all the time, and I'm going to say it, okay? If it is an objective test, it is not fair to favor one gender or one race. And I'm going to say it again, guys, whether you guys want to agree or not. I have seen in my experience on city council, okay, that when a black officer, particularly a prominent one like Ron Twitty or Clarence Williams, is charged, the entire majority of city council jumps in and calls it racism, whether there's any racism or not. Happened every time.
Well, I keep hearing you say, the consent decree, Cincinnati Police Department going back to the 80s. And it kind of sounds like you're saying, like, look, we did this 20, 30 years ago. Why do we still need it? Is that what you're trying to? Okay. Well, the reason.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, let me just say one
let me
thing.
answer that, though.
The reason they haven't gotten rid of it, the reason they haven't gotten rid of it
go ahead.
is because city council knows that they are going to get hit at the polls if they get rid of it. That's the only reason.
No, that's not why. The reason why they haven't gotten rid of it, and the reason why you can have consent
and it's discrimination.
Degrees,
it's reverse discrimination, but it is discrimination.
You can have consent decrees that are supposed to put new rules and standards in place for the police department. The reason why it takes a long time.
That's not racism that's different. That's not racism.
I haven't even finished my point yet, Phil. Let me get it out.
Sorry,
and you can tell me I'm wrong. So
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think all of us know Iris Rowling. And I think the one thing, and there's a lot of things we can glean from her work, is that just because you put a certain standard in place or have a consent decree, it doesn't mean your work is done. You know, police departments, what we've seen with the Cincinnati Police Department, they need constant monitoring. They need to make sure that somebody is vigilant for years, if not decades, to make sure that the standards that they say that they're going to put in place are actually put in place, right? Because it doesn't always happen that way, Phil, because people are resistant to change.
Well,
It's
when you got a
natural
written
human being
objective
thing.
test, I think that's a pretty good standard. Everybody takes the same test.
Well, it's even deeper than just a test, though.
Here's what I'll
That's
say.
the only basis for promotions. That's it. That test.
And the
Pretty
consent decree
fair.
is no longer
Pretty unbiased, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it's not. It's no
Here's
longer.
what I'll say. Here's what I'll say in general, and I'll challenge anybody if you work in any kind of environment, corporate America, wherever you work. If you look around your workplace and you are the only minority, or there are only a couple of people there, but you got like a workforce, let's just say 25 or more. And if you look around and you're the only one, and especially if you're a white person too, ask yourself, why is that the case? Why aren't
That
there
isn't
more
the case
people?
in the police department. It was the case 50
No,
years ago.
I'm just talking about. I'm just talking about in general to make a point here, Phil.
We're not talking about general.
Yeah, we are. We are talking about in general.
About the Cincinnati Police Department.
We are talking about in general. We're talking about fairness and treatment and equality. And the reality is that you need these things in place. You need intentional programs in place because if left to their own devices, Phil. White folks like to think
Programs are different from quotas. We're talking quotas.
Let me finish this thought. White folks like to think that they're enlightened and they're fair. But I think when they look at the habits, they hire people and they bring people in that look like them that they're comfortable with. They bring their friends in. They bring people that they know in. They bring in people that they're comfortable with. And most of the time that leaves us out. Now, every now and again, we'll break through. The credentials may be too much to deny, or maybe they're feeling benevolent to black folk. But you cannot look at the racial disparities in the workforce and say that it's anything other than some form of bias that exists in people who are making the hiring decisions.
You're saying in the Cincinnati Police Department?
I'm saying if left to their own devices, it certainly would be.
Yeah, but it's not left to their devices. It's an objective test.
It's not specifically because of the things that are in place that you're railing against. Otherwise, it would be.
And the consent decree was stricken down in a few years ago. So it is not.
Phil, what are the? I wonder.
It was in place when I was in office.
I wonder what the racial makeups are of police departments in the suburbs.
I think.
Do you think they're anything close to the equality or diversity of what you see in Cincinnati?
I would suspect they're probably similar to the proportion in that suburb.
I bet you they're not.
I don't know your point. I don't understand your point.
I guess my point is
Loveland is racist. What's your point?
No, I guess my point is, Phil, is that you would see greater diversity if bias didn't exist, and you don't, and it has to be intentionally placed upon organizations. Otherwise, it just does not happen.
Okay, let me say this. Programs that are in place to protect against bias, I'm fine with that. But what I was referring to, and I defer to Fanon that it is no longer in place, though it was for many years when I was in there. What we're talking about and what I was referring to is first of all, the fact that for many, many years, more than we needed it, there was actual discrimination in promotions and hiring, frankly, against white males in the police department. Those are the facts. And I'm going to say it again. I can't tell you how many times, and it happened somewhat in the Ron Twitty situation. And by the way, I love Ron Twitty. I don't know where he is now, but he's a great guy. But the bottom line is when a black officer was charged, okay, the entire Cincinnati political establishment, at least the majority city council, regardless of the facts, would stand up and try to overturn the discipline. Happened all the time.
You know why, Phil? And I'm not suggesting that it's right or even that should have been the case. But when you're an African American and you see, look, the white establishment doesn't have to do that because you guys just do it. You make excuses for somebody. You give somebody an out. You give them the hookup. So there is no reason for anybody in that community to raise hell, because you guys just do it. You hook up your partners. So when black people say that, when black people see that and they say, look, these white guys are hooking up their friends, they're covering for them, they're letting them get off, and now they're about to, even if Ron Twitty was wrong, it's like the O.J. Simpson thing. O.J. Simpson, a lot of black people believe O.J. Simpson was guilty as hell, but hey, white men been getting off on the system for years, so give us one, right? There's sometimes that attitude that's there. And so what you want to point out Ron Twitty, but I'm asking you to talk about the 10 or 15 cases where there was somebody white who got the exact same thing Ron Twitty got, and you ain't bringing that up.
Yeah,
and I just don't buy it, Phil.
I know that there have been there have been numerous cases. Like there was a white officer, I forget his name, a couple of years ago, who was basically requiring pressuring women who were picked up as prostitutes to perform sex or oral sex on him, or to avoid being arrested, or the woman's son was arrested and this and that. And that guy got sent to, I'm positive he was convicted, sent to prison. I know many instances like that where white officers, white or black officers, were justly accused and justly prosecuted and justly punished.
I didn't ask you about the ones that were punished. I'm asking you about the ones who got the hookup.
I named some specific cases like
who got a slap on the wrist where they should have got something more severe.
So listen, the Cincinnati Police Department is over 100 years old. Over 100 years old, going way back until the majority of this country thought a different way. And so, Phil, you want me to believe that somehow white men are being what? They're being the victims of racism. Show me statistically in Cincinnati where white men are anywhere other. Show me in any statistical category in Cincinnati's history where white men are in any other position than at the top, including inside the Cincinnati Police Department. You got a majority white police department that's been there for 100 years with a majority white command staff. Most of the leadership is white, but you want me to believe that white men are under assault? I don't buy it. I don't buy it one bit.
Well, under assault may be a little bit strong, but in terms of favoritism, both statistically, in terms of for the 40 or 45 years that consent decree was in effect, they were absolutely discriminated. It was required by the consent decree. So don't tell me I'm not giving you facts.
I don't buy it. Inside the city of Cincinnati, white men has always been at the very top. They're still at the top on any statistical
do you
category
understand
you want to
what
look
the consent
at. They
decree
make more
said?
money. They have more wealth. More white people in Cincinnati, or white men are in positions of leadership. But because of some preference on a test, you want me to believe that white men are somehow what?
No, it's not preference on the test. It's preference on the results.
They're being discriminated against? No.
What happened was that if a white, the fact is that even if a white male officer scored higher than a female or a black officer, after the way the system worked, they moved the black or the female officers up. That is a fact. So don't say I'm not giving you statistics.
So Phil, let me ask you this question. So if what you're saying is that, and basically this is what you're saying, is that this fair objective test that's been given prior to the consent decree that was given out.
No. I'm not saying it's the same test.
Let me finish my thought. Like prior to the consent decree was so fair and objective that in the history of the Cincinnati Police Department, that no black officer was ever able to pass that test to achieve a promotion, but only white men officers were able to do that. So if that is indeed the fact, then what you're saying is that black men and women, and maybe even white women, are just not as smart on an objective test as white men, that they can't pass it. So every time there's a promotion, a white male officer gets that promotion. That to me is evidence that the test is not fair and objective, or that there's something in the water. Because if only a certain type of person is always passing the test, Something wrong.
No. First of all, I don't know the history. I know that what the test has been like the last, I don't know, 30 years. I don't know whether they even had a test.
You know what it was before that, Phil. That's why we got the consent decree.
Oh, okay.
You know what it was, okay? It's what the consent decree would not exist if the results weren't anything other than what I just said to you. The consent decree exists because Black people were not getting promotions within the police department. Fair? That's the reason why they have it.
Why the consent decree came into effect?
Yes. Yeah, because Black people weren't getting the promotions.
Well, whether it's promotions or other issues, I'll assume that's the case. Back in the 80s, yes.
Okay, so I'm saying if there's been a stretch of decades where no Black person has been able to pass the test.
No. It wasn't no Black person. No. What do you mean no Black person?
Well, let's just say one out of 2,000, one out of every 2,000.
Where are you getting these numbers from?
I'm just tossing it out there, Phil. I'm just saying that Phil, if there was a high preponderance of it happening, there would be no consent decree. Nobody comes through with a consent decree and says we need to put these things in place to make sure.
45 years ago. 45 years ago.
Happening. It would still be happening today if it wasn't for the consent decree. That's what you don't want to accept. And that's why I'm telling you.
I don't accept it. I don't accept it.
This is a fair and objective test. I'm telling you, a test that only produces one type of result all the time.
What do you mean? You think black cops don't do well in that? What are you saying? You're saying we never have Black officers that get promoted based on their merit on the test? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that's what the consent decree is saying. Or otherwise it wouldn't be in place.
Look, it's clear that the Cincinnati Police Department has engaged in a practice of discrimination toward Black and brown people, citizens. So I think it would also be fair.
What years? We're talking about now?
I think,
now or
well, I mean, what was that, 2000? The big law school in the latest dissent decree, wasn't that just 2000? That wasn't that long ago.
2000.
You're talking,
yeah,
you're talking about the riots, after the riots. That's a different.
Yeah,
I'll talk about
it led
that.
to another federal consent decree where the
Hey,
federal
I was
government
on city
came
council
in.
then.
Well,
No.
actually, you had people here
No.
locally who compiled a lot of data, and then the federal government came in and said, "Yeah, we see a system of discriminatory practices." All I'm saying is that if you've got a police department that is guilty of a series and a history of discriminatory practices against citizens, it's not a stretch to believe that Black officers inside the department are dealing with some of the same stuff. That's just common sense.
I'll be happy. First of all, and this is maybe a topic for a different time or a longer period, but I'll tell you something. If you look at all those so-called consent decrees around the country where the Justice Department comes in and says what's the wording they always use? The practices, blah, 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 are of the police department discriminatory. Do you know what? As far as I know, there has never been a Justice Department review of any police department in the country where they didn't say the same thing. Why do they do it? They always come to the same conclusion every time.
Wow.
Every time.
Yes.
Not once did I know of did they say, hey, these guys are doing pretty good. Okay? It's a lot of
Yeah,
BS.
because by the time they get to the point of saying we need to take action, they have already investigated to determine that they are engaged in a pattern and practice of unconstitutional
pattern
behavior.
and practice. Go back to 2000.
But
I'll tell you what
they
happened.
but they don't open that investigation all of a sudden and we hear about it. No, as I'm sure you know, they investigate for years, take all kind of complaints about a particular department before they do anything. So by the time they actually
that
do
isn't
say,
how it works.
hey,
No,
we're
you're
moving
wrong.
now, because
No,
we
you're
have
wrong.
seen and established that there's a pattern.
Let me tell you what happened in 2000 as an example, because I've always felt strong about this. Was my last kind of 2001, after the Timothy Thomas riots, if you recall that. Okay, Justice Department hadn't been.
When it started.
Let me finish. Justice Department hadn't been taking years of complaints. What happened is after the riots, okay, Charlie, what's called the mayor's name? You know who I'm talking about.
Lucan.
Yeah, Charlie Lucan, who wanted to kind of play up and satisfy a political constituency, voluntarily asked the Justice Department to come in, strictly for political reasons. It wasn't like they had been studying Cincinnati for years. And as usual, they came up with the same conclusion that they do in every single city. Patterns and practices. It's like, why do it? You're going to say the same thing. That's how it. That's how they did it.
That determination of pattern and practice. Lawyers like myself, who actually filed certain lawsuits. And then we, for several weeks, asked people, citizens, to come and provide their individual stories about their engagements and their problems. We took hundreds of complaints and we turned those over after we sifted through them so that they could then decide whether those were significant enough to justify moving forward and investigating. So we're not talking about what I think folks did. I'm talking about specifically what I personally was involved in and watched as it actually occurred. And I was a civil rights lawyer at the time. So when you have several different lawsuits involving different individuals, and when you have different accusations of different districts systematically with similar allegations, that looks and said, wait a minute, something is wrong here. If this many people in this many different circumstances are saying similar things, maybe we need to address this as a pattern and practice issue.
You know, TNT makes a great point. You know, at the end of the day, there might be some officers who've been uncomfortable. There might be some officers who felt like, you know, somehow the rules have been stacked against me and it's unfair. But generally speaking, I agree with T. Nicole. She writes, the Cincinnati Police Department is much better because of the consent decree and the collaborative agreement. And I would agree with that. Today's Cincinnati Police Department is not the same as it was 20 years ago, precisely because of the good work of the people like Iris Rowley and all the folks, Fanon, the consent decree, whatever they've been doing internally, whatever that is, it's been working and need to keep going in that same direction.
Correct if I'm wrong. Iris Rowley was involved with Damon Lynch III back in 2000. Am I right? Isn't that they were part of the? I forget the name of the group.
Black United Front. Black United Front was the name of the group.
Yeah. And I know where I'm going to set everybody off on this, but the truth of the matter is, Damon Lynch III started those riots because I was in city council when it happened. Okay, he was the leader, and he directed all of his followers to not listen to what anybody's saying, but to jump on the tables and get all angry and get violent. And he led them to the police station where they broke windows at the Cincinnati police station on Ezra Charles, and that's where the riots started. Now this is a whole.
No, I'll tell you what started riots, Phil. Friday after that, what started the riots was the 9th killing of an unarmed African American.
That didn't start riots. No,
yes,
what do you mean? That didn't start the riots. That was the reason they committed acts of violence.
Spark thrown onto the fire. That was the gasoline. That was so when they and I was at City Hall that day that you're talking about. Ken and Damon was sitting at the table. Chief Stryker was over to the left. Another buddy of mine, who I'm not going to name, he stood on the table and they said, nobody's leaving here until we get some answers. Angela Leisure, who was the mother of Timothy Thomas, was sitting there as well. And everybody was screaming, hollering. It was a warm week. It was the week of spring break. It was a Monday. It was a Monday afternoon at about 2 o'clock. My office was across the street. They did leave there and go down to District 1 and say, hey, we need some answers.
No. They started breaking windows. They didn't go.
Not what they started doing when they left City Hall. Now, later that night, somebody did those.
God bless him. God bless him. Look, I like Phil. Phil's a good man, but Phil makes the common mistake that makes racial conversations in this country so difficult. Phil wants to boil down the racial unrest, the civil unrest, the riots, whatever you want to call
uprising,
a single moment to something that Damon Lynch did. And that is the problem, Phil, why we can't make any progress, because that's what you think. And the reality of what
I was there.
Fanon and what other people are trying to tell you is you can say what the match was that launched the kindling, but the reality is Cincinnati had problems for many years that went unchecked. 15, 16 Black men by the time we got to Timothy Thomas, wasn't it? That collection of frustration, was always bubbling under the surface. And there's still things that are bubbling under the surface. And so it's never one word or one act that sets it off. And that is the mistake that some politicians make, that people of the white race make. You guys want to boil this down to the simplest compound. And it's not that. And that is why we continue to struggle.
Let me offer, Phil, you should be comfortable though, because with the new Trump administration, they're getting rid of consent decrees. They're not going to investigate police departments anymore. That's on page 300.
Turnabout is fair play. Turnabout is fair play.
Project 2025.
You should have voted for that, man. Sounds like
we've got. Don't
Trump
throw
was
me in with
thinking
Trump.
on
Don't
Johnson,
try
man.
that. You're being tricky
You know
there.
what?
But no,
Martin
here's
Luther
the
King
thing.
gotta.
One thing I disagree with my friend Kevin on is this idea that when there is a riot, there has to be some kind of oppression that led to it. I just saw a PBS thing on these terrible racist riots in Wilmington, North Carolina. I don't know when it was, how many years ago, where these basically white supremacists burned down the whole black section of town, killed people.
It's like 18,
horrible stuff.
I think it was 18 something, 18 when the
Whatever
red
it was.
coats and
Whatever, it was a riot.
I know what you're talking about.
It was a riot. Now, do I think
massacre.
because those racists and white supremacists committed those acts of violence and burned up everything, does that mean there must have been some hostility against white people at the time? No, they were a bunch of racists.
Well, but there was still something that happened. There was something that caused them to believe that that a violent reaction was appropriate. I mean,
yeah, it was because there were blacks that were doing well in business, and there were a bunch of racists, and there were blacks in Wilmington on the city council and in high positions, and those white supremacists down in Wilmington, North Carolina didn't like it, so they just rioted and they killed them all. Doesn't mean there was any justification.
I know what he's talking about. He's talking about in Wilmington. It's like 1898, I believe, and there weren't city councilmen. They were House of Representatives and congressmen that were actually
also local government. Also local government. They were in.
It was a Democratic Party. It was a Democratic Party who used propaganda and the red hats and the red coats, and they used all this propaganda to destroy black families. So you are absolutely correct. So I kind of see where Phil's going with this, with the riotings, because it wasn't just something that they just did. They just went in the black community and they destroyed it. It was a collective thing that happened over a couple of years. They started with the propaganda. They started with the newspapers and the media at the time in the 1800s. And it was print media, and they started disparaging black people and putting us in blackface and very bad. And they take black people, mean we're going to take their women. It was a whole movement. So I see what Phil was talking about, and it's similar to what the Democratic Party does now when they're.
Before we do that,
Tarris stays on point, man. He stays on point with, throwing that knife back at the Democrat Party, man. You are on point with the Republicans. I hear you, but listen. I got to hold your feet to the fire. What you just talked about in history was not a riot. That was a race massacre. Let's use the right words. What happened here in Cincinnati back in the early 2000s was not a riot. It was an uprising because of years and years and years and years of a lot of oppression.
Oh, come on, uprising. Come on, you weren't if you were the small business owner
Let me finish it, though. I didn't say a word when you was talking. So the tip of the spear, what really got things, popping off back in the early 2000s, there was like 8 or 9. It was a bunch of unarmed black men that was killed by police, and people kept talking about it. As Dr. Martin Luther King was said, and I'm going to change this a little bit. He said that a riot is the language of the unheard, but it's not a riot. An uprising is the language of the unheard. So a lot of people were not heard in Cincinnati for a long time.
So that wasn't a riot. What happened in 2001?
That's what led to that public display during the early 2000s. That was not a riot.
Yeah, many people do not characterize it as a riot. Many people who are part of social movements do not characterize
Damon
that
Lynch
as
called
a
it
riot.
an uprising. I call it a riot. I mean, are we really going to argue about what word to use?
Absolutely,
come on, we know what happened.
It makes a big deal. Yes, we are going to argue about it because what you're trying to do is rewrite history. You cannot rewrite history.
What do you call the Revolutionary War?
I would call it a revolution. I'd call it a violent revolution.
Okay. So we realize that sometimes when you have violent revolution, there's just cause behind it.
Yeah,
you got to say that if you believe in America.
Yeah, I'll say that if you
believe in America. Because look, we had a revolution over something much less than oppression. We had a revolution over unfair taxation that people didn't like. That they were getting taxed without representation. So we had a revolutionary war over something much less than slavery and oppression and murder.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you feel like the Revolutionary War upon which this country was founded was justified, you mean you can't find violent revolt or uprising in the face of oppression, murder, and discrimination a just cause? That you might say, I can see where people might
I'll show you the
rise up
distinction
violently behind that.
Yeah, well, here's the difference. The people who were attacked in the
Or should we just
Revolutionary
call it a
War were the,
Revolutionary War, right?
whatever word you want to use, call it an uprising, I don't care. But my point is that the people who the colonists attacked, okay, were the British Army. Okay, now if you want to jump to to the 2001, whatever you want to call it, uprising, I call it riots, whatever. The people who suffered were small business owners, and mostly over the Rhine, black and white small business owners who this mob went in and burned down their whole business, broke their windows, stole their stuff. They weren't oppressors, they were just business owners.
The irrationality of resistance is exactly what we see in the 60s when my parents were engaged in that. I mean, yeah, we saw cities burning down and folks were hurt as a result of it, and insurance policies went up. But guess what? They were acting under the guises of an oppressive reality. And it was trying to uncloak themselves from the oppressive reality. You're doing like that. My father was drafted and went to Vietnam at 19 years old. He came back and was court-martialed because he wouldn't go to LA to quell and shoot at black folks who were engaged in resistance. He was cleared by the Supreme Court and obviously went on to become a Supreme Court justice. But his oppression was no more liquid than what people who later felt like they were going through, or the people in 1868 after the presidential election were going through, or the people in 1976 in Tiananmen. I mean, when we don't experience it, we diminish it and we denigrate it. But it doesn't mean that it's any less real to those who are going through it.
Excellent point, Fanon. I just want to piggyback on here, and I might step on your toes a bit when I say this, Phil. I'm going to try to be sensitive, which is not my forte.
I'll try to put on some heavy shoes to protect my toes from your stepping on them. So
words matter. Words matter. Call the difference between a riot and an uprising. It matters, right? Just like it matters if you're talking about what happened with Jewish folks during what I call the Holocaust. And I don't make no equivocations about it, because to me, any attempt to call it anything other than what it is you're trying to change the narrative. You're trying to rewrite history, and it cannot be tolerated. What happened to Jews was a Holocaust, period. And what happened in Cincinnati was an uprising, period.
Tell that to the small business, the small guy, black or white, whose business was destroyed who did nothing wrong, but whose business was destroyed. Tell them that. Ask them if they think it's an uprising.
What Phil, they think doesn't really matter, but I would say the same thing to them.
Yeah, this is a lot. And look, don't mistake what anybody on here is saying about, anybody who lost a business or who suffered anything and saying that is something that they should have had to endure, that they deserve that in some fashion or manner. Nobody is saying that. But what I will say is those sorts of things are a byproduct of a political system and a governmental system, and sometimes even a law enforcement system that has been so negligent, so corrupt, so derelict and discriminatory that it leaves people in no place but backed up into a corner where they have to resort to violent uprising to be heard. And that is a dangerous situation to be in. It was a dangerous situation for Britain. It's a dangerous situation for Cincinnati and for every place else when you back people into a corner where they feel like nobody is listening, nobody is concerned about their death or suffering, then they are going to make you hear them. And we've seen it time and time again. And to try to reduce that to all these are, and look, in every situation, you're going to have people who are in it for the wrong reasons. Yes, some people just want to be violent. Some people just want to steal. Some people just want to, but that is not the bulk of why you see these sorts of things pop off. Those are opportunists who might jump in and take advantage of what's going on. But make no mistake about it. What led to what we saw as the civil unrest or uprising, whatever name you want to label it to, was the oppression, the discrimination, and a community that was fed up with seeing their people getting killed and not seeing justice being held to it. And to say anything other than that, I think does a disservice to what happened back in 2001.
Oh, 100%.
What has happened since?
100%. Good conversation. Kind of took its own little tangent, but it felt like it was organic, and we all
I'm
had
getting a
some passion
reputation.
about it.
I'm getting kind of a reputation for doing that. I did it with the NIL last week. It's kind
Sound
of
good.
becoming it's kind of becoming my modus operandi, you might say.
Oh,
on the show.
okay. Well, then I'll watch you then. I'll keep my
I've
eyes
noticed that
peeled.
Tarris has been sitting back eating his popcorn today because, Nathan, you and Phil have been on the island today. I know Tarris came into this strapped up, ready for battle, because he's probably like, hey, man, I'm going to have to hold my own against these 4 cats. But I just been watching him. He's just been sitting back, man, eating his popcorn, watching, enjoying. He's been smiling the whole.
Let's try to engage him a bit
90
more.
minutes.
Then. Let's try to pull
Cincinnati.
him in.
Tarris,
I live in Kentucky, man.
Tarris, you and I have formed a bond on this show, I think. This is going to be a lasting.
But I live in
thing.
Kentucky.
Now,
I'm not
I
going to
hate-
speak on matters in Cincinnati, but
Well,
I'm not from there, and I wasn't here. I lived in Kentucky. I get to watch your guys' beautiful view from my house, but I don't speak. That's like you guys telling me what we need to do over in my community. I'd be like, shut up. So I'm not going to speak on you guys' stuff. But
Tarris,
great
let me just
conversation.
say this. Tarris, I hope your reputation doesn't suffer because of guilt by association by any ideological association with me. I don't wish that on you, my friend.
I do a damn good job on my own being hated for being a black Republican. I do a really good job on my own.
You deserve all that too.
I wish we had time to
all
talk
the
about that whole
scorn,
black Democrat,
all the
Republican,
vitriol. You deserve
conservative,
all that.
liberal ideology. I mean, I want a whole show on that because when he said the Democrats did this, how about it was the conservatives that did that? Huh?
I would love
talk about that.
Well, he's
I
talking
would
about the
love to go
Southern
back there.
Democrats that were all racist. We know that.
I love the history part of it. I love the history part of it. That's why I love conversations with you guys, because it just takes me to a history part. And when you start talking about 1800s, that's my place. I like it because black Republicans ran things. Black Republicans ran things.
Progressives.
We were
They
Republicans.
happened to have the title Republicans. They were progressives.
Hold on. So is the progressive movement hiding behind the Democratic Party?
No, I don't think so. Well, first of all, let me say, I don't characterize myself as a Democrat anymore. I used to be an elected official, but I am a thought person. So we can talk history about conservative, the bourbon Democrat conservatives that started the KKK. They were the conservatives. The reason it was the radical revolution and radical reconstruction because of the radical Republicans. We don't have radical Republicans in 2024. We have radical Democrats. So it's a misnomer to suggest that it was the Democrat that did. Democrat did. That's a smokescreen in order to disenfranchise folks from believing or being associated with the party that they may be associated with. But again, we ain't got time for that today.
Hey, sir, let me rebuttal. I agree with everything you just said. But when the Democratic Party have been misusing a majority of their demographic, specifically black men, and putting us in a corner and telling us to be quiet because we're not in line with because we're not done with the women's rights or the LGBTQ community. And black men who are smart and articulate are tired of being put in a corner, as we have shown in this past election, and we get more representation in the Republican Party. You're going to see a shift like the Charlemagne the Gods, the Stephen A. Smiths, the Van Joneses are going to be leaving the Democratic Party and coming to kiss the ring.
I think that more people will leave parties. I don't think that the presidential election was as much about Republican and Democrat as it was about Trump. Folks were not running to the Republican Party; they were running to Trump. That's my personal opinion.
That's where you guys lose. I'm involved in the Republican Party as a precinct chair. You guys know how it works. You have committees and executive committees. These are people who are a part of this driving the parties on both sides. And you get people going to the DNCs and getting all the Kool-Aid in the echo chamber of the DNC where you don't get light of what's really going on and what's really going on the outside. This election proved that. What's really happening on the outside, and that's why I'm here to see if you guys are still in or if you guys said mercy yet, and you got to say look within the party, and you guys got to do some fixing within the party because we're on. While you guys are still talking about Trump, we're on to Vance 2028.
here's what I kind of subscribe to the Malcolm X school of thought when it kind of comes to politics. I think that if you are black in this country, you can make the argument that neither the Democrats nor the Republicans do as much as they should for folk in this country. I certainly don't think that black people have gotten the return on investment that they've given the Democrats, and I don't see anything that Republicans are trying to do for black folks. So we are in somewhat of a conundrum politically about where to go. And so I think rather than blind loyalty to any party, black people are better served to be independent thinkers and to try to leverage more of our voting power, particularly when it comes to Democrats, because I've said this, Democrats can't win without the black vote. It's that simple. And so for a party that is beholden to the black vote, particularly the black female vote, we certainly should be getting more than what we're getting. And I say that you can't just blame the lack of progress that we want to see for black people solely on Republicans. Like there has to be some complicity, because in my lifetime, we've had just as many Democratic presidents as Republican presidents in my lifetime. Yet we still talk about some of the same issues. So you can't blame all of that on Republicans. Certainly, they're a part of the problem. But I think we just have to begin to think smarter politically, and how do we leverage the power that we do have to get more of what we want. I don't think as a people we maximize it.
You're saying that the Democrat, that you made a comment about the Republican Party and they haven't got. We're not playing the short game. Me or any other Republican that I know who is involved in the political process. We like right now, we don't care. Like everybody's focused on in this election, everybody's focused on Project 2025 and Trump. And we're like, all right, cool. You're focused on that. Let's focus on winning this election by going underground using TikTok. When I was on this programming last time, I was like, I got 10 people to 10,000 people who are just like me with 30,000 people who are on TikTok. I can command 10,000 people in a room at one time. And your chat room laughed at me and said, what is he going to do? Tweet about it on TikTok. I was like, okay, cool. Using those same things. Using those same things. We are moving on past. Do what?
I said, put a little bit more bass in that. We didn't really quite say it, like a little more bass in your voice.
Well, you said I was wrong and I wasn't wrong. But in the Republican Party, you're saying that we need to be independent. Blacks need to be an independent. Well, okay, my bad. I misspoke. I want to finish this thought about black Republicans and black Democrats. You're saying we should need to be more independent thought like Malcolm X. Independent thought on a local level, on city council, school board, state representatives, prosecuting attorneys. If you're going to get somebody through as a Republican because of you can ride the coattail and you are a black person, I feel like you should drop the Democratic Party who is not doing anything for you and cause some resistance instead of getting along to get along. I think the Democratic men specifically, black Democratic men specifically, heterosexual men need to go in there and tell them we want to start running more stuff. Y'all let the women take it over.
Why don't you do that with the Republican Party though, Tarris?
I am doing it. I'm personally
the Republican Party that black people need more stuff and come up with a black agenda, and let's see how far your Republican buddies take that.
And I'm telling you, because right now you guys are saying that. You guys are saying that. You guys are saying that now about the party.
Don't do that. Actually, don't take my advice, because if you go into your Republican buddies talking that black stuff, what will you do for black people? You're gonna find yourself on the outside looking in. So don't.
I did every time I go into a meeting. Every time I go into a meeting, I speak for black men first. I've told you that before. Any meeting I go into, I don't care.
How are you speaking for black men? Are you walking in there demanding, saying, "Look at the inequities. Look where black people are in Kentucky. This is what we eat right now." Are you standing on business, or are you going there, playing it safe so you can still be cool with the clique?
Not at all.
I don't know.
I'm not. Let me finish this. Let me finish this, Phil.
On no gangster black Republican stuff.
Byron Donalds.
Some of you doing that.
Byron Donalds. Everybody's like, where is Trump's black cabinets picks and stuff like that? We're gonna walk down and we're going to think about 2028. Why is it like the black men's collectively?
So basically, you ain't
hold
getting that
on. When the Me Too movement had their troll on it, they went full fledged and they didn't think about it. They just went full fledged and they let the machine take them. When the Black Lives Matter had their thing, they went full fledged. Now the black men are getting some attention. We have thought, just like you laughed about me and you thought I was crazy about the TikTok stuff.
Tarris.
We have black men thinking about what we're going to do in 2028.
Tarris,
Let me say this.
if
Let me say
you're
this. This
saying
is
that
a
here
mistake.
in this space with us, if you're saying what you're saying right now in this space with us, there's no way in no world I believe walking into these Republican spaces in Kentucky on no gangster black, you got to represent for black people now stuff. I don't believe it one bit. Just
Let me
based
say
on
this. Let me say this, Nathan. This is the mistake. This is a mistake that Tarris makes, and I see a lot of black Republicans do this. First of all, Tarris is right. If you are a black male and you want a political rocket ship to the top somewhere in political office, run Republican, because you will have a straight ticket, and the party will use you. This is what they do to black men. The Republican Party uses black men that they like to set out there and say, look, these are the good black, like Tarris said, these are the good black men, the articulate black men. These are the black men that side on the side of the things that they like to say, and they use it. But then when it comes time to reward that, they never get it. Look at Tim Scott. Tim Scott cooned. He did everything that he stepped and fetched it. He shuffled. I love you, Donald. I love you, Donald. Thinking he was gonna get something, and he ain't got nothing but a bunch of embarrassing memes and clips.
Yeah, he got what he deserved. As far as I'm
You guys are playing the short game.
This is the mistake that black men think, and this is why I say, like, what deliverables? Other than, and a lot of black men do this, they use it because Tim Scott has used it. He's gotten a lot out of that. Tim Scott has probably become very rich running for political office. You can do that as a black person running Republican, but you are not going to penetrate the policy platform. You're not going to get the high-ranking level positions, and you sure as hell ain't going to become a presidential candidate. So get that out of your mind, black Republicans, right now.
Personally, I wouldn't want to go that far. I want to affect locally what's going on in my community that I can touch as a black man at city council and doing those kind of things, because I believe in my heart that those are the things that affect our community first and foremost. We put too much emphasis on who the president is. I'll say that over and over. And until we can get more black men leadership into city council and okay, let me address what you just said about me walking into places. And when I walk into places like in Kentucky, it's a 88% white majority places. I'm not going to go in there and talk about, okay, there's 13% black over here. This needs to be the main focal point. Whenever there's time to talk, hold on. Whenever that time comes, I am going to be able to be there whenever the white majority who are in these positions want to have these feel good, oh yeah, let's allocate some funds over here to this because we think it's going to be good. I can be there and say, no, you're messing up that money. You need to take it over here to my dude at this barbershop in the hood over here. He touches the people. You need to take it over here to this person over here because he touches the people. All that stuff that they have on the upper echelons or whatever they have that are distributing the funds. We need more people like me, more people like you sitting in here funding where the funds are going and distributing in the right places that we know that can touch our black youth.
You know what I hear? Exactly what I thought. You ain't walking into them spaces in Kentucky with your chest out talking about this is what you got to do for black folks. You're doing exactly what you just said. You're going to play the game to get along, to be in a room, and then one day they might throw you some crumbs, and you're going to take those crumbs and try to do some good stuff with it. That's it. Period.
This guy is never going to
I
go back on the
hear
show if you guys keep talking to him like that.
No, I can tell you. I've been dealing with this. Phil. I've been dealing with this.
That's how bad you're treating.
I've been dealing with this kind of stuff and this rhetoric from black Democrats, the do nothing Democrat side, for so long. It doesn't affect me. They don't. Okay, they have. That's why I want to come on here to see if they have said, okay, you know what, y'all got us. They're still.
What?
Still won't concede.
Hold. You still won't concede on this show with me, and I was gonna say, okay, you got it. Never gonna happen, brother. Ever.
Cool. Let me say this in fairness.
Okay.
What I like about
winning.
fairness to Tarris, let me just say, Nathan, because you was kind of hard on him when you kind of remix what he said. I understand why you said what you said, but I'm gonna say I heard it slightly. I'm gonna say I heard it slightly differently, and kind of give Tarris some grace here. So one of the things he said that I do agree with is, and one of the things we don't focus on as much, is that your local politicians, your city, your county, your state politicians generally impact your life way more than the federal elected officials do. So as they say, all politics is local. And so is there some benefit by having greater diversity among the parties? Absolutely. But so long as you keep the ideals of trying to progress Black folks as you espouse at the forefront. Now I get you're not going to be able to go into some of these places and talk to them because they're not gonna hear you. So I understand to a certain degree what Tarris is saying in terms of you got to be able to speak to an audience in certain terms to kind of get what you need, because they're just not going to take the medicine, Nathan. They're not going to take Nathan the Barbarian. Nathan the Barbarian is not going to even get access to the room.
Why are you doing this?
So you're
Kevin?
not going to be able to come in and Nathan the Barbarian.
Truth.
I mean, look, I'm just being honest. That's the truth. Nate the Barbarian will not get access to the room. You'll have to break in, and then they're going to call the police on Nate the Barbarian. That's how it goes. And so I understand what Tarris is trying to say, but to your point, Nathan, we can't compromise when you do have access to those rooms. However you're delivering the message, you got to come across in a way with real policy that's going to work for the people. Like, you can't come up with stuff like, I get what they're trying to talk about, these empowerment zones. Donald Trump always likes to talk about the empowerment zones and how much they're beneficial to Black communities and all of these sorts of things. Again, I'm not a believer in that in terms of real solid economic policy that's going to help Black people, but you can't compromise on policy that's actually going to work. Now, if you're going to get in those rooms and you're going to find a different way to send that message to get policy that's actually going to work for Black people, by all means. But yeah, I can't compromise the language and the policy. That is doing us no good.
Well,
what is the Democratic Party? What is it? I mean, it's seriously, you can talk about local. I mean, I can't even talk about locally that because Cincinnati's demographic is 50-50. So that's why I don't speak on Cincinnati issues. When I'm talking about issues, I'm talking about from a perspective from Kentucky and the demographic and what I've learned from being involved in the political process and since 6th grade in Kentucky and being involved in going in Boise State and learning legislation and learning how it works and then being involved in city council and working on things within my Commonwealth. I don't understand how things work over because I'm not running on a global level. I want to make an impact where I can go talk to my state representatives, my state legislators, and say, okay, you guys got this funds allocated. I'm in this situation. I'm in this community. I'm an elected official. Give me some funds so I can start a program if there's funds available for that, so we can help children learn how to tie a tie, shake hands correctly, start a bank account, and then use those things. I don't care what color you are to be affected by. That's why I want to get away from this race thing so much. I don't care what color you are, because I'm a Black man. And when I walk into these places, I want them to see Black man is here that knows what he's doing. And then, but whenever I walk into these places, and when I walk to the Democratic Party, when I go to a meeting in a Democratic Party, and I'll land my plane here. I go in and they start off with their pronouns. When I go into a Republican place, they start off with the pledge and a prayer. And I line myself up more with the pledge and the prayer than I do with the pronouns.
Man, so that's a nice political slogan. It's not true. I've been to I don't know how many Democratic caucuses every Saturday morning while I was in elected office, and even since I have not been in elected office, and they do start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah,
nobody calls me by my pronouns. I don't allow that, nor do I accept that. So that sounds good on the sound clip, but it ain't true. That's more that smokescreen stuff.
That's why I gave him props early, because he's playing the game. Like, with everything he's saying, he's turning it back to make a critique of the Democrat Party, or you need to try something different. So I get it. I'm not saying you should change.
There's a movie called The Spook Behind the Door. I'd like for you guys to check out one time.
Oh, come on, we talking to? We already hit and
Okay,
read the
well,
book.
cool.
I might have the book over here somewhere, actually.
All right, cool.
Yeah, I think I do.
All right,
Yeah,
cool.
who you talking to?
All right, well, cool. We good. We always gonna be good then. We always gonna be good. And I'll see you whenever I'm still, because when I'm results, check mark. When you see me for the next, I'd say whenever I'm gonna quit politics in about 8 years, check mark results.
Well, and I would say the same thing, and I'm with you on that. And I would say that's how we should judge. We should judge any politician, but that's the same way we should judge some of these Black Republican politicians. You brought up Byron Donalds. Now, I'm not in Florida, but my question would be: are you delivering? What are you delivering? Are you making a difference with your presence through policy for your constituents? I don't know, because I'm not in Florida. On the national level, he's just a sycophant for Trump. And I don't know if that serves anybody other than just him. So that goes back to the point I was saying to you, Tarris. Like, it's real easy to ride. I think if you are a Black politician and you want to run Republican, man, they love that. You're a unicorn. You check off a lot of boxes. But what are you actually going to do other than change your own position? So same thing for you. What are you going to do? Time will tell.
I'd like to say something about.
Well, God, let me finish this part right here, and I'll be quiet. I'll be quiet after this. My main goal in life is to bring more Black men, specifically away from the Democratic Party.
Oh my God.
To either the Republican Party or independent thinking.
Now, why would you want to do something like that?
You asked me a question. I'm giving you.
Why would you want to do that?
Because Black men specifically have been used as a tool in the Democratic Party for long enough, and unless y'all find some strong Black man leadership that's going to lead you guys off of what y'all have been getting for the past 60 years or whatever since 68, I am going to actively show the history of the Democratic Party, what they did, what they stood for, who Margaret Sanger is, who Hillary Clinton is, who all these people are, and give them the opportunity to make the decision for themselves. So that's what I'm going to get out of the Republican Party.
So Tarris, you just made my point for me. You're doing exactly what I thought you was doing in them rooms. That's exactly what you're doing. And that's why they like you in the room, because you're a tool for their political play, which is, if we get more Black people to come with us, as we just learned in the last presidential election, we'll win more elections. They don't really care about you. They don't really care about delivering policy.
I don't care about. I don't care about the results.
Bro. You just
I care about the results. Okay, hold on. You say that they're using me. I believe that the Democratic Party used the boule, all the hold on, the Roland Martins. I'm glad we talking about this. The Roland Martins, the Steve Harveys, they use all that to try to pass Kamala Harris off as a viable candidate, which you said on your programming she was doing a great job. I was like, hey, Black men are what are we doing? We're going to move the needle. I said we're going to move it 10%. I bet whoever it was, I bet $1. Remember? I said I'll bet whoever, because y'all were making fun of me. I said I'll bet whoever $1 that we move the needle 10%. We went against mainstream media.
Bruh. That wasn't a stretch. The previous election,
that was enough. That was enough
8 or 9%.
to dog walk this election. That was enough to dog walk this election. And I don't see where you guys are going to recover. That's why I'm here. I want to see how y'all going to recover.
This is why the good white folks in the Republican Party down in Kentucky love you in the room.
Oh, jeez. Come on. Give it a break.
I'm keeping articulate here, man. I'm
been trying to get here
go ahead, Phil.
I want to hear.
I just want to say one thing about Tarris. He can take it, but he can dish it out.
Yeah, I like Tarris. I'm glad you're here, bro. We need to have these conversations. We need to have these conversations. Like, we ain't being disagreeable. There's a lot of passion, but we should be having this conversation. We should be talking with Harris. You know what I'm saying? That's the whole point of it. And then maybe the audience or even ourselves. I mean, sometimes I find myself thinking back like, the point he made, or, okay, yeah, I can kind of see that. And hopefully the audience can get something out of that. That's the whole point of it.
Look, Tarris has somewhat of a point, right? But if I'm a Black male who's a Democrat and I'm gonna leave the party, I gotta leave for something better, right? Like my whole thing is like, you don't just quit your job and don't have a better job lined up. Like, like foolish people do that. If I'm tired of my job, I'm going to find a better job and then leave my job at that point, not just quit and leave myself out there with no options. And so what I would say is if you're trying to entice black men to leave the Democratic Party for the Republican Party, like what is your selling point? You can say, okay, the Democrats are not doing this, and this for you, but what are you telling me that the Republicans are doing for me that I should leave the party? Because look, I'll say this, the Democratic Party isn't perfect, but it's undeniable that, you know, black folks have made gains, you know, under that party. There have been some things that have happened for black people under that party. Not as much as we would want, certainly. Probably not as much as we deserve, certainly. But it's more than we've gotten from the other party. So if you feel that strongly, Tarris, like what are you selling to black men? Because otherwise you're asking them to quit a job without a better job.
Right. And I can tell you what I'm selling. I'm selling empowerment. I'm selling to get to stop with the handout mentality and go get a trade, go do something. I'm thinking empowering. I'm not even thinking about my generation. I'm talking about the kids. I want to start probably about 13, 14 years old and empowering them. And who cares? Because 5 years from now, those will be the voters. And 5 years from now, that's whenever I feel like I'm going to be trying to make a move to do something. So if I can find those 13 years olds and start showing them truths. And like I told you guys before, there's a group of us that are actively moving to do this and show programming and show proof. Say if you bring your
There's money in it.
Hold on. Say you bring your 12-year-old kid to a program that we provide and we show them how to financial literacy and we provide them $99 in the Fidelity financial market, which grows a compounding interest, and you get to monitor that account with your kid and watch them grow. And we present this to you as a low-hanging fruit voter, and we show you and your family a different way on how to, and we say, this is what we can show you. What is the Democratic Party doing for you? They're going to put Beyonce in your face and all these people in your face and give you all this stuff, this certain kind of programming, when me and several people are actively going to implement. Look at King Randall down there in Georgia, what he's doing with his group. More black men need to keep doing this kind of stuff. And that's where we go.
It sounds like a smart thing to do. It really does, man. Because like right now, who makes
that program that King Randall did? King Randall, he was self-funding it for it. He made a tweet about his wish list and Amazon. Elon Musk retweeted it. He can't keep enough stuff. His wish list keeps getting bigger. In these initiatives by these black men who Roland Martin, go watch Roland Martin and King Randall's interview.
So
Roland Martin was talking the same stuff. When King Randall was talking the same stuff about empowering black men, Roland Martin was like, how you gonna do that? How you gonna do his whole Roland Martin thing on King Randall?
I watched that.
King Randall is absolutely doing those things, and watch us implement these democratic things right here in this community. And
here's why I asked you that question.
Go ahead,
who's paying for it? Because what does that have to do with being a Republican? If that's a privately funded thing, what does that have to do with what the Republican Party is doing? Anybody on their own who has the resources, and the inclination to do it can do that. Party ain't got nothing to do with that. I'm talking about specific thing that Republicans are doing. The party is doing policy they're creating.
In the Commonwealth of Kentucky, where there's a super duper jagalooper majority in the House and Senate. I'm talking about out of all 300, there's probably 13 Democrats and the rest 200 and something are Republicans. So whenever the funds are allocated to these different cities different municipalities, and your state representatives have to be there to be represented. What personally, me being a black Republican, I can see where that funds are being distributed. And I can say, okay, in Jefferson County, you're thinking about putting your funds into Black Lives Matter when they have done nothing. Let's put it over to here. You're thinking about putting this funding into Planned Parenthood, where have they done nothing for the black community. Let's think about putting it over here. In my community where I'm at, I can call all of my House representatives and all of my state senators and say, hey, what's going on? And if it has anything to do with black community, they're going to come to me. And I don't see why we don't have more of that in Each party. Does anybody in the, I mean, but that's my thing. That's what I don't understand about how they see a black conservative or black Republican, and then you automatically demonize us, not knowing that we're working just as hard.
You know what? You know, for people who may have missed it, and I really appreciate Tarris and his honesty. I mean, he just gave you some game. He gave you some game. Black Republican one-on-one. He just told you when you walk into the room, here's what you need to be saying. Hey, you tell your Republican, colleagues that I'm gonna do everything I can to bring as many black people, whatever your race may be, to leave the Democrat Party to come to the Republican Party. Republicans love that. You're their kind of guy. That's a black job in the Republican Party. Go back to the people that traditionally have been a part of the Democrat base and try to siphon off as many as you can. They're going to love you forever. And then secondly, monetize. Like the one thing I've been saying about Republicans, and we saw it come to fruition in this past election, where podcasts and digital media plays such a big part. And I said just for many years and years is that, Republicans support Republicans. You can start a podcast and have 1,000 subscribers and end up having somebody real close, real high up in Donald Trump's orbit to come on your show. They understand, and I see it being put in practice more often than I do with the Democrats, the power of independent media, micro influencers on all levels, and then supporting organizations like Turning Point USA. That was started by Charlie Kirk less than a decade ago. And basically what they do is they go to colleges and try to infiltrate the colleges with the whole Republican mindset. They are huge now. They got crazy funding from different Republican billionaires and nonprofits and political action committees. So Tarris is right. If you're trying to make a name for yourself and find a place for yourself in the Republican Party, do exactly what Tarris Horton has just told you. Do exactly that. Because I'm seeing people do it and it's working for them. This guy, he said, King Randolph, what he just said is absolutely right, because they seize upon him as a token. And
Come on, Nathan.
Come on,
Nathan. This young man is helping so many black youth. He's doing way more. So. He's doing way more than any YMCA organization that is ran by the left. These organizations that are ran by the left, he's doing more independently, teaching these kids more than that. Than I've seen the organization over here, across the bridge, or how they take these black kids, they bring them over here and they treat them like, oh, you coming over here today? Oh, you better sit in here for a fee. They treat them like cattle. They don't teach these kids, ask them anything what they need to learn. And I've seen that with my own eyes over on your guys' side of the bridge by a Democratic ran organization. I'll take that budget myself and create more change.
Randolph his flowers without trying to denigrate the YMCA, other organizations. I don't know enough about what King Randolph, this brother you brought up, is actually doing. I'm just going to assume and take your word for it that he's doing good work. God bless him. I hope he helps a lot of people. But to say he's doing more than the YMCA,
I would say he's doing more in where he's at right now than the YMCA is doing in Northern Kentucky and Cincinnati area. Northern Kentucky, over the Rhine, our general 3-mile radius right here, he's doing more in his community, housing kids, teaching them trade skill schools. I believe it. I really do believe that.
I that doesn't sound right to me, but I'm not in your neck of the woods, so I'm just going to trust your judgment on that and say, okay.
I mean, I'll say this, that, what Tarris brings up, I think sometimes we look at this stuff, too simplistically in too black and white terms. And that's to suggest that anybody who's a black Republican is somehow a bad guy or a sellout or is not doing good things. As I've said, several things can be true at the same time. You can be doing good work that does good things for black people in the community, black kids, and I not share your same political philosophy on a lot of things. Politics is complex, people are complex. All of us are not any one particular thing. So I think, we do have to get smarter in terms of our conversation and how we talk about some of these things and how we view certain people. But I also don't think there's anything wrong with holding people accountable for what they are doing or not doing on both sides of the party. Because I do think, to Tarris's point, I kind of said this where I was saying, like, the faults that I have with the Democratic Party is is we need to hold the people who we support to the same level of account to the people that we don't support and whose politics we don't agree with. Because to a degree, there are some people who you might even consider to be a part of the same party who are not doing good work or who are wasting resources. And we see it all the time in the terms of some of the decisions that get made. Cincinnati is largely a city that's a Democratic city, and we have issues all the time with the school boards, with the city council. So just because you are of the same party doesn't mean you get a pass when you're not producing results. And that's really what this needs to be. What we have to get back to is policy and results. We got to get out of this code of personality. We got to get out of this, I'm sold out entirely to my party, I'm going to vote the slate. No. What are people doing? What are they saying they're going to do? And what are they delivering on? And whether you're a Democrat and I'm a Democrat, if you ain't delivering, you got to go. And we got to get somebody in who is delivering. And if somebody on the Republican side is delivering better than a Democrat is, but I just may not agree with everything, I'm going to try to support you in the thing that you're delivering on for me. Right. And acknowledge that. And that's what we got to get back to in this politics, this tribalism. To a certain degree, does nobody any good, whether you're Republican or Democrat. We got to start holding everybody accountable.
I'm with you, man. We're in the age of tribalism, though. That's where we are. We're just going through this era right now, and a lot of it was brought on by a lot of circumstances, including the evolution of Donald Trump. Now, well, guys, listen, I've had a great conversation, which I really appreciate everybody's time. Before we roll out, I just want to give the crew members, is there anything that you didn't get a chance to say? Or, of course, we didn't get a chance to do all the topics. We'll pick back up on Friday. But is there anything that perhaps you didn't get a chance to say? Or maybe somebody said something that you took issue with? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
I'll say in closing, no one, this isn't scripted. And I've told you like before, whenever I speak for heterosexual Black men first, because we're underrepresented, and it's not, and I do this for me and my children and my children's children's children and children. And I'll say this, my bills are paid, my kids are healthy, and my wife is hot. I'm doing good.
You're doing real good, bro. You're doing real good.
Listen,
real good.
That's a good trifecta there, Horace. Tarris.
Yeah.
I wasn't gonna go here, but since Tarris brought this up, and this came, Nathan, you and I were just talking about this earlier, and Tarris said it. That what do you say? Heterosexual men are underrepresented, and I'm just sitting here thinking, like, man, this is like the white men who feel like they're the most discriminated people. I'm like, hey, if y'all are losing, tell me who's winning. I don't think that heterosexual men are underrepresented by any stretch of the imagination. That's one of those. That's one of those misnomers that has become popular in political circles. But come on, man, get off of that, man. Heterosexual men are not struggling. They haven't been struggling.
That's political
propaganda.
Black.
We are still on top, okay? As far as society is concerned.
So you're telling me that women, the Democratic women, the women of the Democratic Party don't run things over the men of the Democratic Party. You're telling me that the women of the Democratic Party don't run things, the most educated women, the HBCUs, come on, Kevin. You ain't trying to tell me that the men of the Democratic Party, especially heterosexual Black men, are running things more than the Black women, the most educated, the most decorated, the most put in place. You telling me that y'all run things more than no. Black heterosexual Black men.
Let y'all have this conversation.
Here's what I'll say: if heterosexual men or Black men are underrepresented in that way, shape, or form, it's not because of women. It's because, hey, look, men got to step up and start handling their business. That's the bottom line. If you feel that way. Look, and I'll say this all the time. I don't disagree with you. I even say this, when you look at the church these days, most of the people that you see in church, particularly in the Black church, are women. Where are the men at? So you're not going to get any argument from me about the need for more. I'm not going to sit out here and say that it's even a majority of black men who are not out there doing the right thing and stepping up, but more of us absolutely need to. And that's not because there are any special programs or anything like that are discriminating against men that are not giving us opportunity to step up and do things. We just got to step up and do things. That's just the bottom line. If black men or men in general are disappointed with where they are and they feel like, you know, women are stepping up and then we got to step up, assert ourselves, and be men. That's the bottom line, is the way that I see it.
I think there's a hint of sexism. I don't think you intend this, Tarris, that I'm picking up on. Like the idea that because you see a few more female or even black female elected officials, that all of a sudden black men are losing something and women are changing or running everything, is like this gender hysteria. That ain't true. I mean, you got Hakeem Jeffries. He's the leader of the Democrat Party. The Democrat chairman is a black man. I just don't see it.
It's the echo chamber that you guys don't want to admit. It's like cognitive dissonances sometimes. Like, you guys don't want to believe the truth. You guys don't want to tell the truth that black women run the Democratic Party. You don't want to tell the truth. You don't want to say that.
Can you name the black women that run the Democrat Party? One or two?
The Urban League.
I said the black women, not the organizations.
Okay. Here we go. I know we're getting short on time. I'll just leave it at that. If you want to,
you're gonna leave it at that.
Nathan,
okay,
Nathan, if you want to take it there and say that black women did not run this past election as well, and
now you kind of change.
And with Joe Biden, how he chose Kamala Harris because the black women told him to, because they told. Because
she's the vice president.
The black women were going to say, they said, we ain't going to pull for y'all if y'all don't put Kamala Harris as the.
Wasn't just black women that said that. The entire black Democratic Black Caucus said that you're not going to pass.
Who was the Black Democratic Caucus?
You're not going to pass over the second highest person in charge for somebody else. The Democratic Black Caucus. I mean, that's no secret. They've come out and pretty much said, you know, you're not going to pass over Kamala Harris for somebody else.
Oh, yeah, that would be terrible.
That's not it. But here's one thing I do want to correct Tarris on that. Black women have always been there. Black women have always been a part of every significant movement that black men have been a part of, that the Democratic Party have been a part of. So it's a mistake to say somehow or another that women or black women in general have just sort of like come out of the shadows now all of a sudden and are running things. Quietly, women always been behind the scenes helping to run things. The difference between now and back at 40 or 50 years ago is now women are getting the acknowledgement for the hard work that they've always put in. And I think that, you know, I think that now that more of a light is being shined on their contributions and their voices are being heard instead of being pushed to the background so that a man could be propped up and forward, I think that's the adjustment that you're seeing.
But, you know, Tarris you going to say something, Phil? I'll let you jump in there.
Well, I just had a comment that isn't related to what you guys are talking about. Now, if you want to finish up, then I can make my little comment.
Yeah, no, go. Let's. I think we talked long enough on that. I can save my thoughts. Go ahead, Phil.
I just want to follow up on something Kevin said a few minutes ago, which really stuck with me, which is he was talking about the ultra, I think, partisanship in this country. And I just want to say that as a Republican, I think the thing that has truly hurt me the most in these recent years is the gutlessness of Republican leaders who continually put the party over the country, whether it's Rob Portman, Mitch McConnell, or even the total ass, pardon my language, butt kissers like Lindsey Graham. It is shocking to me the way people choose party over country. And to some extent, the Democrats have done this, not as much. I think of the situation of Peter Meyer, who was a courageous Republican who voted to impeach Trump. Well, what did the Democrat Party do? They put money behind a big pro-Trumper guy in the Republican primary because he'd be an easier opponent to beat than Peter Meyer. Peter Meyer, who we ought to admire for being one of the few Republicans to stand up against Trump. And I think about the comment that Liz Cheney made, talking to people in my party, leaders. She said, someday Donald Trump will be gone, but your shame will remain. I think that's a powerful statement. I think if there's one thing I would hope we here would all agree on, let's put country ahead of party.
Yeah, I think it's not even party though. I think it's self-interest. Like when I think of Lindsey Graham and these other prominent Republicans, they may say they're putting party over um,
No, they
the
don't say it.
country.
They don't say it, but they do.
Yeah, but what they're really doing, it's all about self-preservation. That's
Yeah,
what I
but their
believe. I'm very cynical about it.
self-preservation is by supporting or a guy like Trump. I mean, and it's basic. So in effect, by being partisan, they're furthering their self-interest. I think we agree on that.
But but I think that by being partisan, that's just a cover. Like I think it really comes down to Lindsey Graham protecting himself. And this cover is, hey, I'm doing it for the party. That sounds good, and it helps the party in terms of his rhetoric. But that's just people, man. More and more I'm learning. We might as well get into it. It's not just Republicans bending the knee to Donald Trump. You got media bending the knee to Donald Trump. George Stephanopoulos this week decided that Trump sued George Stephanopoulos and ABC going back about a month. Nancy Mace, who was a Republican elected congresswoman, she was on that show, and during that show, they were talking about Donald Trump. Unfortunately, Nancy Mace has talked about how she was a sexual abuse survivor, and then George Stephanopoulos in the interview was pressing her, saying, hey, Donald Trump is a rapist and you're a sexual assault survivor. But yet you support him. These two things don't jive. And apparently through that particular show, he uttered that statement somewhere around 50 to 100 times. I don't know the exact number. Donald Trump sued him, saying defamation of character and that it was essentially wrong.
And the suit would have been tossed out. But what you're talking about, which is the theme, I'd suggest this is a theme for one of our next shows. I brought it up before. The thing that scares me as much as anything is this oligarchic thing where Trump, because of his intimidation and their fear of him, is basically slowly causing the media to capitulate. And I think that's what you're referring to, that ABC did this week.
Yeah, actually, $15 million.
It's Disney. It's Disney that owns ABC that really made the decision. But I think this is, I think it's late in the day now.
Let me give all the facts here. It sounds like Kevin's going to jump in, but let me just add a couple more facts before you jump in, Kevin and Phil. So what happened? So George Stephanopoulos, rather than fighting it, as I understand, Trump was supposed to be deposed this week. Not that would have ever happened, but the lawsuit, they settled it for $15 million. That money is going to go to, I think, the Trump Presidential Library. A lot of people in the media are saying, why are you bending the knee? George Stephanopoulos about a year ago was very
I don't think it's
defiant.
George, it's Walt Disney. It's Disney, Nathan.
Yeah, George probably had very little involvement.
Yeah,
he signed off on the document, so he did have something to do with it. But a lot of people are saying that this is another example of mainstream media that is bending the knee to Donald Trump. But go right ahead.
Yeah, so I think that it may be a little bit more complex and simplistic than that, and I'll just try to do as quickly as I can a quick, defamation educational period thing here. First of all, the threshold to prove defamation is usually pretty high, especially for a public figure against the media. It's, not only do you have to show the truth of what was being said, but you have to actually show damages and actual malice, which means that you can prove pretty conclusively that what was done was not just a slip of the tongue, a faux pas, just general carelessness, but it was done with intentionality and an intent to harm the person that you were talking about. And it's a pretty high threshold for the average person, but it's even higher if you're a public person, particularly somebody like the president. Like, you generally don't see presidents of the United States suing media companies, right? That's pretty unheard of. And so I think what happened when ABC News, they originally filed for sort of like a summary judgment, I think in the beginning, to have it sort of thrown out outright. The judge did not do that and allowed the case to progress. Now some scholars and legal experts say, hey, if it had gone to the next stage, that again, they could have probably asked for the case to get tossed a little bit farther down the road, and it might have actually happened. Here's what's not in dispute. George Stephanopoulos did call Donald Trump a rapist. That was not what he was convicted of in the E. Jean Carroll case. So there's the factuality of the fact that he did call Donald Trump several times something that he is not, which is a convicted rapist, which is actually not what he was convicted of. So on the standpoints of factuality, they had him there. Now, can you prove actual malice? That's the next part of this puzzle that has to be proven. What could have happened here is that when you go into discovery, that means that ABC News would have had to have turned over every email, every note, every voicemail, every bit of evidence that George Stephanopoulos and ABC News had. They would have foraged through all of that for discovery. And there is the very real possibility that there were some things in there that ABC News did not want to be made public. That even if it did get out, it might not have helped Donald Trump win the case, but it would have been damaging. It's almost along the same lines. If you remember when Fox News settled with Dominion, right? They went through that whole process, and there was some embarrassing discovery that came out on Fox News, and they wound up, sort of settling that case. ABC News might have been trying to avoid that. I don't know the answer to that. So that could be one of the reasons why.
That's on both sides, Kevin. There could have been something through that process of discovery that could have embarrassed Donald Trump as well.
Yeah, but Donald Trump. But here's the thing: Donald Trump is immune to that. What's going to come out about Donald Trump that's going to be any more embarrassing than what you already know, and it's not going to have any. It's not going to have any impact on him. And I think that's fair. I think that's fair to say. We've already seen it. Nothing sticks to this guy. Nobody cares. People don't care. They voted the guy president.
But that wouldn't have been the point, though.
Myriad of embarrassing things.
Yeah, but that wouldn't have been the point, though. The point, if ABC, Disney's lawyers, the point would not have been try to embarrass Donald Trump. It would have been, but it would have been through the process of discovery to try to find something that would have made their case. And I think they would have found enough evidence out there to suggest that what George Stephanopoulos said is not is within the realm of what actually happened, right? And I think it would have made the case. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a layman, so I'm just reading through it. But go right ahead, though.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm offering some stuff for the audience to consider that it may not just be as simplistic as a media company bending the knee. I mean, it could very well be that there were some things that ABC News did that they did not want to come out in terms of what would have come out in discovery that might have been embarrassing, that might have, hurt their credibility as a station and maybe even further the case. I don't know. That's just one possible explanation as to why they might settle, because usually media companies, they fight these things pretty vigorously and aggressively, unless you're kind of caught dead to rights, and then you kind of settle to move on and be done with it.
You are absolutely right, Kevin, and that's why people are criticizing Disney right now, saying, "Look, you're making it look as if you guys were dead wrong." Well, I found
they could be.
Over in Kentucky, there's a guy who got $250 million. A guy with the Indians clapping in his face. I can't think of his name. $250 million. So the $15 million that we're talking about from ABC is not that a lot of money when you're talking about this magnitude of something where it could have went. I do believe it's exactly what you're saying. They're kissing the ring, and you're going to see more people do it. Look at the ratings for CNN. They plummeted. Look for the ratings for mainstream media. We're going to see a whole lot more people get in line to kiss the rings, or you're going to see their bottom line affected, which is viewership and which is affected advertising dollars.
Yeah, and one other thing that I will say, just to further make my point, since Tarris brought up the young Covington Catholic guy, there's a difference between a public figure like a president of the United States and a high school kid, right? I can't remember how old he was, 14, 15, 16-year-old high school kid. Like, there's a different threshold there in terms of defamation. Like, nobody's going to look at a 15, 16-year-old high school kid and say that they're reasonably subject to the same kind of scrutiny that you know, you can kind of say whatever you want to say about the president and most politicians in general, and kind of get away with it because they're public figures, and sort of by the nature of their public profile, they're open to certain sorts of opinion and commentary.
Absolutely.
That doesn't fall under defamation guidelines. So there's a little bit of difference there in those cases. Hence why the judgments perhaps that he was able to get in cases against media organizations that he successfully sued was a bit larger than what you're seeing in this case.
Yeah, good, excellent. You're right. That needs to be the point. Big difference between private citizen and the president of the United States. But, you know, going back to this case, like, you know, Judge Kaplan, who was the judge in the E. Jean Carroll case, he spoke to the circumstances and what actually happened. And to me, you know, it kind of lets George Stephanopoulos off the hook. So let me back up here. I remember watching that segment live. I was watching that interview live because Nancy Mace is a kook, and I just wanted to see how George Stephanopoulos was going to handle her. And I remember him saying it over and over again. And I remember thinking to myself, he should probably say tantamount to rape, because technically speaking, right, by the code of the law in New York, it's not rape if you don't use your penis. Right? What Donald Trump was found guilty of by that jury, or should I say responsible for the injuries for by that jury, was that he used his finger. He forcibly used his finger and entered E. Jean Carroll. But let me show this clip for you. So this is a clip from Judge Kaplan. The jury did not award Miss Carroll more than $2 million for groping her breast through her clothing, wrongfully as that might have been. There was no evidence at all of such behavior. Instead, the proof convincingly established, and the jury implicitly found, that Mr. Trump deliberately and forcibly penetrated Miss Carroll's vagina with his fingers, causing immediate pain and long-lasting emotional and psychological harm. Mr. Trump's argument, therefore, ignores the bulk of the evidence at trial, misinterprets the jury's verdict, and mistakenly focuses on the New York penal law definition of rape to the exclusion of the meaning of that word. So basically, the judge is saying, you didn't rape her in terms of using your penis, but you forcibly entered her body with your hand. That's tantamount to rape. That's why you hear me say from time to time, an adjudicated rapist. That's what he should have said. But I don't think that, I think they would have won in court simply by using what Judge Kaplan, the judge who, you know, covered the E. Jean Carroll trial, said in the court documents themselves.
Well, and this is the mistake that Stephanopoulos makes, and this is the thing that we are taught and that's harped on in newsrooms all across, or should be in newsrooms all across the country, particularly when you're dealing with sensitive subject matter like this. Any lawyer that advises a media organization will tell them, stick to the documents, right? Stick to what the judge or what the court has said. Don't get outside of that for legal reasons. You can find yourself in a situation just like what Stephanopoulos did, right? Because you can't say something is something that it's not, even if it's damn close, right? You just can't do that and not find yourself in this type of hot water as a journalist. So I think, like, it's interesting that I wonder if ABC News had their general counsel or whatever attorneys that they work with, you know, having these conversations with Stephanopoulos and staff and saying, hey, you know, stay away from this. Don't say this. Can you review the script? Can you review the questions? Anytime you get into these kind of touchy-feely areas, any newsroom that I've been a part of where we've had a sensitive story where it's legal like that, you know, the lawyers they'll vet stories, they'll vet copies to make sure that, you know, you're not using language that's going to get you into trouble. So it's actually quite surprising that nobody from the legal side, you know, had that conversation with Stephanopoulos, you know, beforehand.
I have a question after this.
Maybe he went off script. Who knows? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, you're right. It's very surprising that beforehand, because they knew what his show prep was, they knew where he was going with it, or they knew that there was a possibility that he could go there. It just seems like standards and practices, the legal department would have said, hey, listen, let me review a question. Let's make sure we stay away from these kind of words because by the technical New York law definition of rape, he was not right. He wasn't that far.
Mhm.
As Judge Kaplan said, he's not that far off. But when you're dealing with Donald Trump and the age we live in, the constant assaults on media, you got to be real careful with every word you say.
Yeah,
Can I,
I mean,
I'm just going to ask a question of how y'all feel about, like, you guys are saying it's after the fact. It's after the fact, and it's all over and done with. Can we just deal with this is a kiss the ring moment that all mainstream media is going to do? You're going to see everybody fall in line with ABC after they do this because they didn't have to do it. You're right. They could have fought this. They could have brought up all this evidence. But if they did this, and in fact, the Democratic Party has weaponized the mainstream media during the Trump campaign or the campaign to Trump bad man, orange man bad, and has used the mainstream media to denigrate Donald Trump for the past 4 years, and they know that he can use the same power when he's in office. That they're like, maybe, because how can you just going to go from he's a threat to society to kissing the ring? This is all like more of the scripted.
This is not about, again, and that's why I say you got to look at the legalities of it, right? So having actually committed an infraction that somebody can sue for legally and get remedy for is not kissing the ring. If you screwed up, you screwed up, right? Like that's pretty much what it is. Like that's not kissing the ring. That's me going to court, having my day in court, and either getting a verdict against me or seeing things going away that I don't want it to go. So I go ahead and bow out of that. And that's why I say, like, looking at this thing legally, like, it may be too simplistic to say they're just bowing and kissing the ring, because if Donald Trump tries this against another news organization that didn't cross a line that Stephanopoulos did, he's not going to win. He's not going to get anything. And other media organizations will fight that. That's why I'm saying, like, in this case, there must have been something that ABC News did not want, which is why they capitulated. Maybe they didn't want to have an ongoing lawsuit going against the sitting president. I don't know. But what I do know from, over a quarter century in journalism is that these are not things that media companies typically do. They typically don't settle these types of cases.
So that's what your first instinct is telling you. More I hear you talk, I'm like, okay, there could be something to that. Because like you said, I mean, typically, even if it's gray, we fight it. We fight it just because the fight is bigger than just Disney, right? It's really about everybody, especially in the age of Trump, and we know his constant assaults on the media. So I can hear that.
Think about it like this, okay? This was a no-win for ABC because no matter how this settlement, I'm saying the settlement is a no-win. Right. The reason why the settlement is a no-win is because the folks on Donald Trump's side are going to say, see, this is what we've been talking about. This is the unscrupulous, left-leaning liberal media, and we got them. We got
already doing it.
Right? We got them. That's what they're saying. On the liberal side, there are people who are going to be like, man, like what you're saying. They're bowing, they're kissing the ring, and they're going to lose credibility and probably some viewers on the liberal side who are going to be mad that the ABC News settled it. Why didn't they fight? Right. So that's what I mean by it
begs the question why they didn't fight.
And you lose $15 million, which you may say, well, for a company like ABC, $15 million is a drop in the bucket. But I don't care how much money you got. $15 million is $15 million. And you best believe they're going to make that $15 million up somewhere, probably in some people's jobs and other things.
Well, like you just said, the $15 million is nothing compared to what they're going to lose in terms of their perception. So there must be a strong reason as to why they didn't go forward. Yeah, I'm feeling
and so that's how you gotta kind of think through that's how I try to think through these things is sort of like logically, like why would let's put aside the giving the MAGA crowd and saying, yeah, we were doing something unscrupulous. Let's put aside the bowing down to the ring and then sort of and giving up $15 million, what that says to me is that you were either concerned about losing way more than monetarily, way more than $15 million, in addition to more lost credibility, that you would settle this. There was something that scared them that was a greater threat than doing this, even with everything that they lose by doing this, because nothing else makes sense.
Well, let's keep our eyes on ABC and see the moves they make and what they do during this new Trump era, right? Because that'll tell us something. Like if we see more of these kind of things, they might even be smaller, that appear to be capitulations or kissing the ring. They were probably kissing the ring in this one. But if they put up a proper defense and be who they've always been and do their job, whatever that means, right? Like speaking truth to power and not cowering away from telling the truth about what you see in the Trump administration, then yeah, that to me gives more credence to what you're saying. Like they had something they didn't want to come out, in the emails or correspondence or whatever could have came out in the discovery phase. So yeah, I'm with that. Hey, Phil.
I think that, to Phil's point, there is no question. I mean, look, Donald Trump's a litigious guy anyway. He sues whoever he can or whatever. So the fact that he sued is not unique.
But Kevin,
I do think,
real quick, wouldn't we all be if we had that kind of money?
Yeah, I mean, he can afford to. He can afford
to be right. I ain't letting nothing go.
Right. But I do think it is one of those things that he is trying to send a message. And if you've noticed, his message to the media is getting progressively more aggressive. It began with the fake news, trying to delegitimize, trying to hurt the credibility. And now it is the threat of, not only will I come at you with litigation, but now he also has the powers of the presidency to potentially bring to bear on media organizations as well, and what that looks like. And so, who knows how that's going to play out. I definitely think the byproduct of this is, if you notice a softness in the coverage of Donald Trump by ABC News moving forward, which almost certainly you will see to some degree, at least in the short term. They're not going to be pressing a whole lot of buttons coming off of a $15 million lawsuit. They'll posit that won't be true, but I guarantee you there are going to be some conversations internally about, hey, we got to be more careful, which is a good thing. Anytime that you step out of bounds, it's always good to review and make sure that you're dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's as a media organization. But I think we have yet to see all of the fallout that'll come from this.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Well, guys, listen, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you. To the people listening, please like and share this particular episode if you haven't already done so. And we're planning to be back with you on Friday at 1 p.m. for another episode of the Hot Mic Podcast. So appreciate everybody. Tarris, appreciate you, bro. Phil, appreciate you. Kevin, you already know. Appreciate everybody too. Fanon, who was with us. And again, positive vibes to Raven. Hope whatever situation is ends on a positive note. So thank you so much for being here. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and we'll see you again on Friday.
Thanks, everybody.
Yep, thank you.